Sports Radio.
A long lead pass for Matthews. Matthews is in alone. Scores! Holy mackerel! Big Pappy has given the Leafs the lead. And there's still time left here. As Martin backs it in. He scores! Jordan Martin with the steal and the finish. And it's 4-3 Carolina. What a comeback!
Levert with a jumper left side, missed it. Offensive rebound. Allen, right side, Strus. Max, three. Bullseye! 5 straight points from Max Strus.
Still loose. I don't hear a whistle. Martin took it away. To DiVincenzo for 3. Missed it. Hartenstein grabs the offensive rebound, and the Knicks another shot. DiVincenzo for 3 in the lead. 13 seconds to go.
He's at the midcourt circle. 4 seconds. 3 seconds left. Why are they not fouling? Jumper Murray. Got it to hard. Denver mounts the comeback. They come back from 20 points down. They win game number 2. 101 to 99 is the final.
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. We're here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the Pillar exterior stage. I'm Ravi Lulla. With me this morning, that's not Damon Benning, as you could probably see. That is our guy, Michael Severe. He's the host of the Let It Fly pod. He's got some sweet gear that he's rocking this morning.
Oh, I forgot I even had that on.
That's a pretty I like that. That's a nice little quarters.
They're very comfortable. There. You know, it's warm, so
it's a nice looking. I like that.
It's very warm. It comes with pants too. I have pants with it.
Oh, yeah, it's like a whole jumpsuit.
Jumpsuit.
Nice.
Get up. Yeah, sweatsuit as the kids used to call it back when we were growing up.
There you go.
Yeah.
He's also the executive director of the Jet Foundation,
Woo-hoo.
Which we just had our awards a couple weeks ago. Have you recovered yet? Are you good now?
You know what? People say that to me. They kept saying that to me. And the next day, I was up at 6 o'clock. I was over at the hotel making sure all of our guests who were heading to the airport were up and good to go and saying thank you for all of them to come. And then that night, I emceed an event for my kids' school called the Rock the Nest Trivia Contest, which is the big fundraiser for Omaha Central. And so I did that that next night. So I mean, I just work. I'm not a big fan of the stop. Like when I do the 50-mile march, the next day everybody's like, I'm taking the next day off. And I've gone to work both years. I mean, I don't know what it is like not to work a lot. I just don't.
Well, I mean, you said you woke up at 6. That's like sleeping in for 3 hours.
That is. So normally what I do is I wake up, and this is being old, about 3:40, I go to the bathroom. About 3:40, I go to the bathroom. And then about 4:30, and my wife has a cat. I don't have a cat.
Okay.
My wife has a cat.
See, that's how I was, but I love the cat.
See, there's nothing to love about Sparta.
You got Mando, that's your dog.
Mando's our dog.
Yeah.
And the cat about 4:30 comes over and like meow, 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 and meow, meow, meows for a solid hour until I get up, and then I give her the okie doke. She thinks I'm heading to the kitchen to give her some. My wife's got her spoiled on this new wet food, right? So she's always been a dry foods and snacks. And so now she's on this wet food, so she wants the wet food. So I give her the okie doke. She thinks I'm heading upstairs. I go to the bathroom instead. And then she's really pissed. Meow, 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 meow. And so I go to the bathroom and do the bathroom stuff. Then I go upstairs. I give her the dry food, the little snacks on the side, and the wet food. And then she leaves me alone.
Okay.
And then I go and I get stuff ready for the kids because I have kids who are hard of hearing. So they don't wake up by alarms. So I have to go wake up both the kids. And so, and I'm a big hot breakfast guy. I don't believe in cold breakfasts. I grew up with hot breakfasts. So like this morning, I boiled, my youngest likes boiled eggs. I made 3 boiled eggs and 2 waffles for him. And then I made a little pancake sausage thing for my oldest. And I put a couple waffles in there too, because I didn't know how much he wanted this morning, because I didn't have a chance to talk to him. And so I just made sure they're both awake. I'm like, look, I'm leaving. You better be up. I'm leaving the house.
I cannot help you.
Once I leave the house, because my wife's asleep. There's nobody to help you. So you better wake up. And so I did that, and I made my youngest some coffee, and I bounced. But that's pretty much my schedule. And then 6:50, Mando and I leave the house, and we go on a little 6-mile walk around. So it starts off on Field Club Trail to the South Omaha Trail, make the little loop, come back home by about 8, 15 in the shower. I'm usually over by the office at 9.
Man, you walk 6 miles every day?
Yeah.
Dang.
Well, no, on the weekends.
I work out of school.
Either on Saturday or Sunday, we do a 10 mile.
Oh my God.
We got to be prepared for the 50-mile march. You got to stay doing miles. It's the key to it.
Yeah.
And then you have to stay doing miles with a ruck on. So you start off by doing your miles, then you add the ruck into the mix.
Yeah.
Because your neck's got to get used to the ruck and your back and everything. And then by a month out, do a 15-miler. So you feel good about it. You feel like you're okay. And then make sure your shoes are good. You have blisters and stuff. If you do get blisters, you have a whole month to heal. Yeah. And then third week of August comes along, and
time to get after
we're
it.
off. Time to get off.
Man.
Yep.
That's your schedule's nuts. I couldn't do it. I do appreciate you giving the okey doke to the cat though. That's
the okey doke. I feel the joy I get when she realizes I am not heading upstairs and I'm going to the bathroom it's huge for me.
Oh, it's how you get up every morning. You're just like, yep, got it.
I got the cat again. She's a sucker. She's such a sucker. And then this morning, I'm sitting. I go to the bathroom and I got the little phone thing, and I'm like, normally I read the New York Times.
Taking my life away.
Normally I read the New York Times review of what happened.
Overnight.
Like the
rundown.
And it's a great little rundown.
Yeah.
I don't actually have the subscription anymore,
but they send a newsletter.
Newsletter. So this morning instead, since I knew I was doing this, I had to go back and watch to see what happened at the end of the Lakers game. Yeah. Right. Because when I turned my attention away from it,
they were up by like 20.
They were up 13. When I turned my attention away from it, it was the second quarter. I didn't go to bed, but I stopped.
Yeah.
And I also didn't watch. I grew up a Sixer fan. I also did not watch the second half of the Sixers game because, as a man, I prefer not to be kicked in the nuts constantly over and over again. So I've determined in life I'm going to avoid getting kicked in the nuts a lot.
Better than watching
by not watching them. I watched the first half. I'm like, okay, cool. And then my son and I, we watched the documentary on Masters of Air. Did you watch that? It's an HBO show that was on. It's the third edition of the Pacific with the boys. What's it called? One's Germany, one's the Pacific, and then this is about the troops in World War II that are in the air.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So we watched a documentary about making that. I watched that over watching the second half of the Sixers, and I feel like I won. I won that battle of what to watch. I definitely did. So I got this morning. I watched the end of both of those.
You for sure did. The last minute of that Sixers-Knicks game was absurd.
Oh, I watched the 32 seconds. 32 seconds of. Look, I appreciate. I'm not a person that gets mad about the referees. I appreciate letting them play. I'm glad they changed. Yeah. It was too much foul calling early in the year. I'm glad, but I'm sorry, dude. You knock a dude to the ground, that has to be a foul. It just has to be. Now, I'll blame the Sixers because if you're going to inbound that situation, the best inbound is actually to Embiid. Yeah. Because he's 7'2". Yeah, he's got long arms. Right up here. Throw it up, and then he jumps up and grabs it, and there's a better chance they call a foul on Embiid than they call a foul on anybody else on the court. Yep. So they tried to get the ball into the guard, and he got hit, and he got knocked, whatever. You lose the game. Good shots by DiVincenzo, one of the most athletic white people I've ever seen in my life. But
people tell me he's not 100% white, and I have a hard time believing.
Well, he's Italian, and the Italians don't believe they're white.
Well,
I don't know if you've been around Italians.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time growing up around Italians, the Tringali family, and none of them believe they're white. They're Italian.
They're their own thing.
A different thing. And he had a 44-inch vertical in the combine.
Yeah, no, he's a freak.
Remember that?
Yeah,
that was incredible.
Well, I remember him at Villanova, obviously.
Yeah,
but
we didn't know he was that athletic when he went. When he did the one step jump at the combine. Yeah, I remember thinking to myself, what the hell?
44 inches is about as good as you get.
Is as good as you
get a couple guys that get to the high 40s every few years. Right, but usually those guys are not very good at basketball.
Right, exactly.
Ironically enough,
just really good athletes.
You just have a couple guys that have like a random 48-inch vertical. And you're like, where did that come from?
When I was a kid, so David Thompson.
Yep, he's the one that
had the craziest vertical. People used to talk about it was a 50-inch vertical. Yeah. Earl Manigat, who didn't make the league, obviously was a New York City legend when I was a little kid. They talked about how he could jump and touch the top of the backboard, which at 6'5", that's pretty high.
Unbelievable.
But yeah, for the most part, you don't see that crazy number like that. But DiVincenzo was that guy coming out of college, and now he can shoot a little bit and won the game for him last night.
Yeah, no, it was a crazy ending to that game. And then you also had the crazy ending to the Nuggets and Lakers. It's probably good Damon's not here this morning with the way that Lakers game ended.
Did you ever buy a house? Do you own a house?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know the process, right?
Yeah.
You go in there and you
Actually
fill out.
Looking for another house right now. So
really?
Yeah, it's
a
whole
thing. Hard right now.
It's a whole thing.
If you need guys, I know people. Anyway, so normally you fill out about 500 pages of paperwork.
At least, yeah.
Right. So you fill out all this paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, really, you don't own the house.
No.
Bank owns
the bank
house,
owns, yes.
Right? Well, in terms of the Nuggets and the Lakers, there's no mortgage payments. There's no paperwork. They own them outright. They paid full cash. They're like, all this money, we now own you. And there's nothing you can do about
It's
it.
like the Dave Chappelle skit where he goes and buys the babies after he gets his reparation check.
Yeah, exactly.
Straight cash.
Straight cash, homie. They own them to the level. I can't remember an ownership like this.
Well, the crazy thing is the games are close. So I think the last 6 games, the Nuggets are 6-0, and all games have been by 6 or less points. And Lakers have led.
They've had leads
in all of them.
That's crazy. It's not like they're getting blown out, right?
No, yeah. But they just own them.
But they're to the point now. They're like me and the cat. They're like, you know what we're going to do this time? We're going to give you a 20-point lead.
Okie doke.
Here, have a 20-point lead, and we're still going to come back and beat you. Don't worry about it. Remember, because look, this is where we own you.
Yes.
See this paperwork? Yeah, and it's amazing.
It's like, no, we're not renting you from the bank. We own you.
We own you.
We
There's
bought you
no
for cash.
mortgage. There's no liability insurance. They own you outright. No, it's amazing.
I bought that baby straight cash.
Straight cash, homie. That's right. I can't get over how, because, you know, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the Nuggets were okay. I mean, I watched them come out of the ABA and Dan Issel and those guys. That was great. But the Lakers, dude.
Yeah, like a Kiki Vandeweghe 80s.
Oh, like even earlier. So, like, before Kiki came along, but, like, Dan Issel, guys were scoring machines. What was the brother? Oh, my God. Played in the movie. Oh, my God. What's his name?
Who am I missing?
Yeah, they made a movie about him, and it was about nuclear weapons, and they ended up killing him in the movie. They shot his plane down. Oh my God, I can't believe he was a great shooter, great scorer, played for the Nuggets, was a wing, light-skinned brother.
Year?
So this is like, he probably would have played from like 78 to
Alex English?
Alex English, my goodness. So Alex English, those guys, right? So I loved, they were fun to watch.
Yeah.
But the Lakers, dude.
Those are like
Lakers,
early Don Nelson teams, I think.
Even before, I think it's before Don Nelson. I think
Donnie Walsh.
Donnie Walsh. Okay, yeah. So even when all that was going on, we're still talking about the Lakers. We're still talking about, 8 championship runs over the course of a decade.
Yeah.
We're still talking about 5 titles. We're talking about a team with the most titles. Nobody cares, Bill Simmons, that they played in Minneapolis before. It's all Lakers titles. And they have the most titles. I look at this, I'm like, this is not, for my mind, it didn't work.
Yeah, no, it does kind of break your brain a little bit. I think a lot of people struggle with the Warriors that way too, where they were just so bad forever. And you're like, what do you mean they're...
And I remember 70s. I'm old enough to remember 76, 77, 75.
Yeah, with Barry?
I was 6, 7, 8 years old. So I remember Bullets, Sonics, and I remember Warriors. Yeah. I remember those. So those are good teams.
The Rick Barry.
But they obviously weren't.
Yeah, they were one-offs.
They weren't the Lakers.
Weren't Lakers, Celtics.
Exactly.
They weren't even the Sixers.
They weren't even the... Well, yeah, from 77 through 83, the Sixers played in, I think, 6 conference championship games and 4 championship series.
Yeah.
Now they only
just got the one, right?
One of
in
them,
83.
Yeah. So my heart has been broken so many times by the Sixers. I kicked in the nuts. 77, that series against Portland, they're up. They get in a fight, they lose.
Yeah.
80, they go to the title game. The Magic's hurt. It's a painful thing to even think about, and that's why I'm not a sports fan like I was. I'll look at my phone. What's the score? Okay, good. I'll just put that back there. I don't want to. I don't need that pain.
The investment's not worth it.
I don't
for
need
you
the
anymore.
pain. Why? I'll watch a documentary about giant
you seem
bombers.
very hurt right now.
I am giant bombers.
I do love a good documentary.
I watch so many documentaries now.
Love a good documentary.
I just watched a documentary. I finally watched Barry. Did you watch Barry yet? Not the TV show, but Barry Sanders.
Oh no, I haven't.
Have you watched Reggie yet?
Are those all
Reggie
on HBO?
Jackson? No, they're not. They're on Netflix, I believe.
Oh no, I haven't watched any of those.
I believe they're both. I think they're both on Netflix. I watched both of those. Great. And we watched that documentary last night on the Masters of the Air, which is these old guys.
Yeah.
I can't even thank you so much to that generation, because we'd be speaking German. The whole world would be under the rule of the Führer.
And none of it, like retroactively, just from a technology standpoint, none of it was a good idea.
No,
like they were doing stuff that we're like, that's probably not. That shouldn't work.
And thank God that we did have some smart people, because we went from having a very poor fighter to having an incredible fighter at the end, the Mustang, which won the war for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just simply put people in these giant fortresses and flew them towards Germany while they were firing flak in the air, and the Luftwaffe was flying around shooting them down. This one group started off with like 165 of these captains that flew these planes. And by the end of the first year, they had 2 left.
Oh.
2. They were dying at a rate. They named them the Bloody 100th.
Oh,
That's what they called the name of the regiment. And they just kept getting in planes and flying there and doing their job over.
Knowing you're going to die.
It's standing in line. And the guy says, they told me, they could look to your right, take a look to your left. Only one of you are coming back.
Yeah.
And they you know what they did? They left college. They left their jobs. They got in a plane and they flew and they died, most of them. But we won the war.
That's right. On the Hurrdat hotline, let's get to out of breath Brian. He wants to talk a little about NBA fouls. Who knows? He might talk about some other stuff too. Brian, what's going on, man?
What's going on, fellas?
How you doing?
Hey, this man, I watched. Yeah, I'm a Laker fan, and I could take losing to the Nuggets all the other times when we lost. Like I could know when, like the game before when LeBron had 7 turnovers. I blame it on LeBron. I blame on the blame on the players. But last night, I watched, I think 3 calls by the referees get overturned, and I questioned all of them. One is specific, the D-Lo foul, where the explanation was minimal contact. Now, Ravi, you referee basketball.
I did not referee basketball. Right? I coached basketball. You coach
I
wouldn't referee for $1 million in a million years.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to take it you're aware of the I'll take it you're aware of how the rules in high school to protect the shooter until they get to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I didn't understand the call or reversal of the call of AD saying he got D-Lo, he got hit after the ball was released when he was still in the air. So I'm kind of confused about that aspect and what's going on. That's more of my issue today. I'm kind of confused about what they calling in the NBA.
Yeah, so
because
Brian,
they got the rule to protect the player till they get to the ground. So I don't understand the explanation. I guess that's what I'm looking at.
For sure. Usually they'll let the contact go if it doesn't affect how the player lands. That's generally when they're talking about protecting the shooter through the end of the shot. It's usually about their landing area more than anything else. So as long as you don't get like feet under them, or you get into their legs so that they can't land properly, or you get like into their body so it throws them off balance enough that they can't land properly, that's generally where you're talking about protecting the shooter throughout the shot. So if it's contact that doesn't affect their ability to land, they generally will not call that.
Okay, that's a whole different philosophy than what they're teaching the whole time, all the way through college. Hey, protect the shooter all the way to the ground. So that's why I was confused. That's what I'm hearing today in the sports world. Hey, these calls from the New York Knicks game to this game, the Lakers game, the referee. I don't know what's going on with that replay, or it was so. This would seem like a lot of overturned calls for the Nuggets that I think got the ball rolling for it to go back in that direction, and calling fouls. I question some of them. Some of the physicality that's allowed on one side of the ball compared to the others is what I see. But I remember Shaq in the league, and they changed the rules for Shaq. Shaq would flail his arms and use his shoulders. But I see other players allowed to do it nowadays, and they get praised for it. So I just wonder what goes on with the consistency of the calls with the NBA, because it looks way out of whack a lot of times when I watch.
They were leading by 20. Their best player they were had over 30. D-Lo scored. They didn't turn the ball over as much in the first game, and they lost a 20-point lead. I mean, it's hard to blame anybody but themselves. It's hard. It's hard to blame everybody on the Lakers team.
Hey, I don't blame him. Yeah, I blame him. This question about the call.
Yeah.
Okay, why AD kept going for that, letting Joker get to his right hand over and over again was ridiculous.
Because he's a magician. The dude got magic powers. He literally disappears. That's what happens. He disappears and shows up on the other side of you. He's a magic.
Make him shoot with the left one time.
I know.
Make him shoot with the left hand one time. That's all.
He's amazing, dude. He's amazing, dude.
Brian, we appreciate the call.
Look,
I'll say there's a lot of people.
Sixers are up 5 with 30 seconds left, and the Lakers are up 20 in the third quarter.
You can't lose those games.
You can't lose those games.
No.
LeBron's he pushes off, by the way. He's got a wide open 3 to go up 3, and he misses it, and you can't stop Murray from getting to his spot. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little funny too, because AD just went on a rant about how he's the best defensive player in the league. He can switch 1 through 5.
Well,
and then Jamal Murray's like, take this.
You can switch
right in the eyeball.
Hey, by the way, he did it the 2 possessions before. The exact same thing. I'm not a person that blames the officials, dude. And Darvin Ham after the game goes, it's all about the work. It's all about the work. It's all about game 3. And then spends the next minute talking about the officials. No. Like you said, it's all about the work. It's not about those other guys, those 3 people in the stripes.
Yeah.
It's about you whenever they start putting it on you and they're coming back, it's about your guys stopping it.
Yeah, your ability to
hitting some big shots to stop it.
I mean, listen, you mentioned AD goes for 32.
32,
He's 14 for 19.
Yep. Yeah, and didn't score in the fourth quarter.
And
didn't touch the ball in the last 6-7 possessions, I believe, something like that.
I mean, you get a 23-point performance where D'Lo goes 7 for 11 from 3.
Bounces back and has a great game.
Like, if you get those two.
And then LeBron's numbers.
Yeah, LeBron's 26, 12, and 8. Didn't shoot the ball super well, but
kind of balances off what Jokic does.
Yes.
Jokic goes 30 and 20 or something like that. 20 and 20. Yeah. I know he had 20 rebounds. I saw that.
27, 20 rebounds, 10 assists.
Yeah, I mean, triple-double. So it kind of balances
just
that
like
out a little bit. Yeah.
Just like a real casual 20-20-10
The difference was obviously Murray.
Yeah.
And Gordon hitting that big shot. Watching the highlights down, that was a huge shot that he hit.
And Michael Porter Jr., 6 for 10 from 3.
Yep.
Like,
there you go.
It balanced out that D'Lo hot streak early. I understand being frustrated with refs as a fan. I do. I get it. I get the frustration.
Yeah, part of the game.
But if you're up 20 points, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that the refs were responsible for blowing a 20-point lead.
It's hard. That'd be hard. A lot of work by them.
You could convince me 1 or 2 possessions, right? You could convince me, maybe there was a foul on DiVincenzo, on Tyrese Maxey on the last play.
Right.
It's like, maybe. Like, that's fair. I could see that. You could convince me that maybe they shouldn't have overturned the call on AD's jumper and it should have been a foul. Okay, that's 2 points.
Yep.
Like, maybe 3 if it goes. Like, you're never talking about more than 2 or 3 points of possession, right?
Yep.
So you're talking about 10 of those happening all against you, while the other team doesn't give any back.
Right.
And that's how, like.
And in the end, the fouls weren't that crazy, were they? The differential?
No.
Was it like three more fouls by the Lakers, maybe?
Yeah,
total?
It was 20 to 17.
Yeah, so 3 more fouls.
You're
Obviously,
in the neighborhood.
You're in the neighborhood. And listen, the Lakers have shot more free throws, and I know it's because they go to the rack a lot, but they shoot a ton of threes.
Mm-hmm.
They've shot more free throws than anybody in the league.
Yeah.
Over the last 2 years or 3 years, it's not even close.
There was only 4 free throw differential in that game.
It wasn't crazy.
No.
And matter of fact, when you look at the stats and you look at what the Nuggets shot from 3, how the
8 for 34.
Yeah, so they were 30-something percent.
23%.
23%, under 50% from 2 or for the game, right? And it wasn't a crazy free throw differential. You should not lose that game.
No.
20-point lead. You should not. Because what did the Lakers shoot from 3?
43%, 13 for 30.
You shot over 40%.
20 percentage points better than them.
You shouldn't lose that game.
No.
I don't care what the officials did. I don't care if the officials walked out and peed all over the court and made you slip and fall. You should not have lost that game.
You gotta you gotta be able to avoid the
the dry spots.
Yeah, I've got to find the dry spots and get to the hole.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
That's Michael Severe. Coming up on the show today, we've got a good show for you. Coming up at 8:00, Michael Vandevoort from Jays 24/7 is going to join us, talk a little bit about Creighton and what they're looking for in the portal. Obviously, they hire a new assistant coach in Trey Ziegler yesterday as well. At 9, we've got Ryan Roberts. He's going to get a little NFL draft for us. Severe and I are both huge draft nerds. So we will get into that. And then 9:45, we're going to talk to Brian Howell because Dion keeps losing his luggage. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if the airline's got a problem, but our guy Deion Sander keeps losing his bags. We got to figure out what's going on there.
It's Louis, man.
We'll talk to Brian Howell. Hopefully he's got insurance on it.
People take your Louis.
If people are taking his Louis, or his Louis running away from him.
One
I don't
of
know
the
what's
two,
happening.
Yeah, that's possible.
So we'll talk to Brian Howell coming up at 9:45.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I mean, everybody on the floor was trying to call a timeout, myself including Nico, coach on the sideline. But they didn't give it to us. But, forget about the timeout. There's a bunch of fouls. That's, like I said, that's unacceptable.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage.
I'm Nick Nurse.
Nick Nurse?
Just imagine.
You call the timeout too?
No. And I say to you in the timeout,
mm-hmm.
You've got to rebound. You've got to rebound.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to block out, and you've got to get the rebound. If you rebound, you win this game.
Mm-hmm.
They failed to rebound.
They did.
They gave up 5 rebounds.
Yep.
In a row.
30 seconds, basically.
To a team diving on the floor and hustling.
Desperate.
Rebound.
Yes.
Board. What does that big Buffalo say in the box out. Box out. Box out. You can make all excuses in the world. Box out. Get a rebound.
At the end of that game, the best big man on the floor was Hartenstein.
On the floor, diving, throwing it around, tapping it out.
Blocking that maxi
Blocking
layup.
the layup.
I mean,
you
want to complain about the refs, that's fine, Joel Embiid, but you got outplayed by Hartenstein.
You got to hustle, you got to block out, you got to rebound. You rebound, you win the game.
If you're in a playoff game like that where it's that close,
yeah.
Whoever, and I know this is cheesy sports coach talk, whatever, But literally whoever wants it more in that situation is going to get it.
That time, yeah. No doubt.
In that, like, listen, I'm not saying over the course of a whole game,
I know.
But when you get to that moment, if you don't want it more than they do, you lose.
And
that's it.
Brunson was horrible.
Yes. And then he wasn't.
And then when he needs it to be, it's like Josh Hart the first game, right? You thought shooting well, but when it came down to it,
did you see Josh Hart in the post game? They tell him what he didn't.
I didn't even watch the game, much less the post game.
Well, I don't know if you saw a clip on the internet.
No,
I
missed it.
So because I didn't watch the post game. I'm not like DB where he watches every press conference.
Yeah, I don't watch.
But no, they tell him that Brunson was 8 for 26 for the game. He goes, damn.
Yeah. That's the what's his face, little dude, Kevin Hart. Damn.
Yeah, when Don Cheadle tells him how old he is.
I'm 55.
Damn. I do want to get into some NFL draft stuff here because I put together a little exercise for us.
Let's exercise then.
Side
straddle hop.
You didn't get your 6 miles in yet this morning, so
I know I didn't do anything today yet.
So I'm
some food,
trying to get some exercise in.
Okay,
all
right.
So I sort of stole this from Ryan Russillo, but I put my own twist on it, right?
Theft.
So a little bit. That's what all good radio hosts do is they steal.
Right.
So he was doing this exercise with Todd McShay about if this player gets drafted in a certain spot and has current player's career, not that they're like productivity wise, would the fan base be happy or mad about it? Right.
Okay. All right.
So what I did is instead I just took all the quarterbacks. He only did one quarterback and did a bunch of other guys.
Right.
I took all the quarterbacks. So I took Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, and Bo Nix.
Okay.
So the top 6 guys, guys that are going to go in the first 2 rounds. I don't think anybody else is going in the first 2 rounds of the quarterbacks.
No.
So I think 5 of those guys might go in the first round, and then Nix probably ends up in the second. But Penix might fall in the second. Depends on how people decide. What I did is I am giving you blind resumes of current or recent NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I'm only giving you their winning percentage, their completion percentage, their touchdown to interception ratio, and their yards per game.
All right. Wins is not a quarterback stat.
I understand that. And some of that is reflected in here.
J.J. McCarthy lost 1 game in 4 years.
It's not bad.
Two in high school, none in high school and 1 in college.
He had a pretty good team around him.
He won 2 in high school where he didn't lose a game, and he lost 1 in college.
But so those are the stats that I'm using.
Yeah, right.
I've got the players that those stats belong to. You do not.
Okay.
I want you to tell me first if you're happy with the production I give you for that player.
Okay.
Second, I'm going to tell you who it is and tell me if you'd still be happy.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Let's start with Caleb Williams.
Okay.
His comp wins 64% of their games.
Okay.
So 2/3 of his starts, basically, he's going to win.
Okay.
67% completion. 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio.
Nah, that's great.
260 yards passing per game.
Okay.
Would you be happy if you're drafting Caleb Williams? Are you happy with those results as the number 1 overall pick? And I think what matters here too is how we've talked about some of these guys, right? Because you talk about Caleb Williams, like, oh, is he Patrick Mahomes
or is he Aaron Rodgers?
Like, is he? So those are the stats I'm giving you.
I probably would take him, although that winning percentage isn't as good as you think it is.
No, it's okay. It's only okay.
It's okay. The passing is fine. Yards 260 is not a lot in this modern day of the NFL.
So it's actually on the higher end. The average ends up being almost all the averages for guys that didn't come into the league in the last few years.
Right.
So if you've got
even going back 10 years, isn't the average?
I looked at a ton of dudes.
Okay. All right.
Most of the averages are between 240 and 260 for the high end guys.
All right.
Because if you think like 260,
you've had guys throw for 5,000 yards.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of guys throw for 4,000 yards.
But think about, so over 16
games, 17 games now. Yeah.
Yeah. But for 16 games before, 300 yards a game is 4,800.
Yeah.
So you're down to 260. You're still in the 4s pretty solidly.
Okay. All right. I probably would take that for Caleb Williams. I probably wouldn't because I think more of him in terms of wins. But overall, I'd probably say, I'd take it.
That's Dak Prescott.
Yep. And Dak Prescott's won a ton of games, but he didn't win the playoffs. So put the playoff percentage in there.
I didn't put the playoff percentage. This is a total.
Yeah.
But if you're a fan base and you go, hey, I'm drafting I'm drafting Dak Prescott, basically number 1.
Right.
How do you think the Chicago Bears fan base reacts?
They should be happy as hell.
Because they haven't had anybody.
Sid Luckman.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
I mean, so they should be really happy if they got Dak Prescott. And there's honestly, if there's a couple times that Dallas' defense played better in games, they probably win playoff games. But I would be pretty happy if I was a Bears fan and I got Dak Prescott.
I think that's a reasonable take.
I'd take it.
If you're a Bears fan and that's how you pitch it to them,
yeah,
I bet 90% of them say, what are you talking about? No way.
I don't know what they do. Watch what they have and
Maybe.
What they've had.
But that's a fair point because their quarterback play has been terrible.
Atrocious.
Yeah, just the worst in the league.
It's them and the Browns. And the Browns have had more success. Think about it. In quarterback-wise.
At least they had that one Derek Anderson year.
They had a great Derek Anderson year. Brian Sipe was pretty good.
Even had a nice Hoyer year in there.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Okay, so we're taking
Baker had a nice year.
Baker did have a couple nice years.
Yeah.
So we're taking Dak Prescott as Caleb Williams.
I would. Yeah.
Okay. And these are not
only the Bears.
Yes. Anybody else takes him, you're like,
most places, no.
That's not good enough.
Yeah.
No.
Fair enough. As a prospect, though, you think that would be underachieving for Caleb?
I think so. As what I think about him
as a prospect,
and also the amount of talent that has been acquired at the Bears.
Sure.
Look at what they've done.
Pretty good roster.
They got a nice offensive line.
And they're probably going to get a wide receiver
at 9, most likely. Yeah. So, I mean,
I don't know if a Dunze will still be there, but they'll get somebody at 9.
Dunze would be the one that I think would be there.
Yeah.
Out of all of them.
Well, because it's not going to be Marvin Harrison. It's not going to be Malik Neighbors.
I believe Neighbors goes before Harrison.
You think so?
I do. I think so.
But those guys are going probably in the top 6, 7-ish.
They're going by 6. I think so. Yeah.
And then a Dunze, you've got a couple picks to hope a Dunze is still on the board.
Yeah, because I think Alt's going to go in there, and we're going to get a defensive player in the top 10. We are.
Yeah.
We're going to get one. So I could see him going to 9. That'd be great. And look at the talent they have.
No, yeah.
And they got a good defense.
They've put together a pretty good roster.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll do one more, and then we'll continue after the break.
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
Wins 67% of their games. 63% completion. 240 yards per game. 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio.
Ooh, 2-to-1. Ooh, that's rough. So he's a guy who threw a lot of picks. Is it Matt Ryan? Sounds like Matt Ryan.
It's not Matt Ryan.
No, it sounds like Matt Ryan.
It's not Matt Ryan. Would you take that production?
Obviously, it depends on and where he's going. But personally, for Jalen Daniels, I feel like he should be better than that. I probably wouldn't take that production. I probably wouldn't.
So that is, I would tend to agree with you. But you want to know who that is?
Who is it? Aaron Rodgers. Not Aaron Rodgers. He throws no interceptions. Who throws a lot of interceptions? Not Patrick.
And these are productivity comps, not style like play comps.
No, I understand. I'm trying to think of somebody who throws that many interceptions because we don't throw that many.
It's a guy most people would take.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Josh Allen.
How in that?
That is a guy almost everybody would take.
Yeah.
But if you just give him raw production numbers,
you
look at it and you're like,
he turns the ball over way too much.
A ton. Turns the ball over a ton.
He's cost them. They've lost games because of him.
Yes. And doesn't throw a real high completion percentage.
Yeah. And
especially in the modern era.
Whatever his yards are rushing, probably be comparable to what Jalen Daniels would be.
Right. That's kind of why I tried to pick a mobile guy.
Right.
I didn't include the rushing stats in here.
Difference between those two guys, and I'll give you the top 5 things that I look at quarterbacks later, but the difference between those two guys is my third one is that when Jalen Daniels leaves the pocket, he does not look to throw, he looks to run.
Yeah.
When Josh Allen leaves the pocket, the majority of the time he's looking to throw.
And that's one of those things where you hope you can teach Jaden Daniels.
You hope so, but he didn't do it at all.
Those are guys that are really hard to teach that from.
Right.
Kind of like a Cam Newton.
Right.
Like when he left the pocket, he was going.
He was going to run.
And you get pretty banged up in the NFL if you do that. And Jaden Daniels doesn't have Cam
Nobody
Newton.
in college has done what he's done in terms of leaving the pocket and running.
Yes.
He's the worst out of anybody in the last 20 years.
And Jaden Daniels does not have Cam Newton's frame to
he
take
not.
up to the.
No.
And that's Damon's big concern.
6'3", 180. Barely. They say 205. That's a lot. I don't believe it. He had stuff in his pockets.
He's 205 like I was 5'11 in college.
Yeah.
That's Michael Vandevoort. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla on the Pillar Exterior stage, reminding you to make sure to go to supernovas.com. They've got all the schedule information, just a couple home games left, including this Friday, April 26th at 8:30 p.m. We got some late night Supernovas for you here this week. That's an 8:30 p.m. first serve at CHI Health Center. Make sure you get to supernovas.com for tickets. Also on whatever other information you need, merch, all team stats, all the good stuff is over at supernovas.com. Go get your tickets for Friday at supernovas.com. Wanted to kind of continue our little exercise we're doing here.
Yeah.
Because I think it's interesting. You know, we got in on the chat that as soon as I say the name Dak Prescott, Bears fans are like, no. And I get it, right?
I just don't understand that. It'd be like saying, you know, you've been going out with a crackhead for 25 years. Somebody comes along who doesn't do drugs. They're not the greatest, but at least they don't do drugs.
Yeah,
that's
it's
Dak Prescott.
It's not a supermodel who also happens to be a doctor.
Right.
But
it's at least a supermodel
stable,
compared to what you have.
Stable job and not going to steal your money.
Not going to steal your money. Dak is going to do things for you that you haven't had done for you in a very long time.
Like complete passes.
That's one. and probably win games.
Yeah, probably win a decent amount
outside
of
of 2 years ago when he had by the way, he had some of the worst turnover luck in the history of the game in terms of tip passes and stuff. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He had that one bad, it was a horrible year to turn the ball over, but look, he bounced back last year.
He largely takes care of the football.
Yep.
He wins a lot of games. He's very productive.
Yep.
And he's not going to steal your money.
He's not going to steal your money. He's not going to be
You
doing
will
crack.
wake up with your watch still on.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
All right, we're going to go to Drake May now.
Okay.
So this is where the win percentages get a little interesting, right? Because like you said, wins not a quarterback stat. It is something we attribute to quarterbacks a lot of the time.
Yeah.
This guy only won 47% of their games.
Ooh.
Just under half. 63% completion percentage. 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio.
Mm-hmm.
270 yards per game, though, which I believe is the highest on my list.
Yeah. See, it's funny with that because I can picture that when they came in the league on a bad team.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 2 or 3 years they were really bad. And then you could turn it around and say, like a Drew Brees did, where he turned it around, obviously.
Yeah, we've seen this guy be a good quarterback.
Yeah,
this version of a guy be a good quarterback.
Your winning position is great because you lost so much early on in your career, then you battled back. I like the fact that he threw for 270. I'm big on this time of era putting up yards. 2-to-1 turnover ratio is not great, but his career could have started off poorly. I don't know. It's tough. That's a lot of losing, man. It's a lot of losing. It's not the Chargers quarterback, is it?
Herbert? No.
Okay.
This guy been in the league dramatically longer.
Okay.
He's got a pretty long track
I probably, as a fan, would say no because of the losses, but I know in my head that there's a chance that it was one of those people that came to a bad team. So
that guy,
yeah,
is Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, came into the league and played for a horrible franchise.
If you're drafted, let's say you're the Patriots.
I hate Matthew Stafford, so I would not draft him.
Sure. Let's say you're the Patriots at 3.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, I can guarantee I can lock in Matthew Stafford right now.
Right.
They probably do that.
Well, the thing is, he leaves your team before he wins.
Maybe.
I mean, the Matthew Stafford comparison is that he goes to the Patriots, they're bad.
But we're doing production only.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Because
I would take Matthew Stafford although in this era of football, I probably wouldn't.
A little bit more mistake prone.
And I want a guy who's more mobile now.
Yeah.
Especially behind a team that's got a lot of talent is problems.
Yeah.
So it'd be tough to have Matthew Stafford stand back there behind that offensive line.
It would.
Although he was more mobile when he was younger. But
I think most Patriots fans would take that, though.
Oh, I'm sure they would.
I think they would take if Drake
Although you're talking about spoiled, the opposite.
Yeah.
The opposite of the Bears.
100%.
They had Tom Brady.
Yes. Although I think Mac Jones may have cured them a little bit of their
I'm sure in their mind they're like, we want the next Tom Brady.
Yeah, it doesn't exist, guys.
Yeah, it doesn't. No.
They've been looking for the next Michael Jordan for 30, 40 years. It doesn't exist.
Yep.
Not a real thing. All right, J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah.
A very polarizing, I think.
Interesting, yeah. It is.
He's an interesting prospect for sure.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into, because you've got some question marks on J.J. McCarthy as well.
Sure.
So we'll get into some of those later. But J.J. McCarthy is going to win 68% of his games.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think the highest number on this
pretty
list.
Pretty good.
67% completion percentage, which I think is tied for the highest number on this list.
Pretty good.
240 yards passing per game, so on the lower end on the list.
Yeah. Running team, maybe.
2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio.
Oh. I know I'm going to get bamboozled here, but I'd love the winning percentage, obviously. I like the completion percentage. I don't like that many interceptions, but if I'm a fan of a team and I get those numbers, I'd probably be happy.
That is one Jimmy Garoppolo.
Is it Garoppolo?
That's Garoppolo.
Yeah. Another guy who went to a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Probably should have won a Super Bowl.
Yep.
I probably would take that. Who's my team? Who's taking him?
I've got him listed as the 4th quarterback.
But
he maybe ends up going.
So Minnesota
3.
comes up and takes him.
Maybe Minnesota. Well, so whoever is what? Either Minnesota or who's drafting 5.
Chargers, right?
Yeah. So not the Chargers. Whoever the next team is after the Patriots.
Giants at 6.
Yeah, let's call Giants.
Okay,
at 6.
Giants at 6. I would say they would be happy with currently. No, because they got Daniel Jones is basically Jimmy Garoppolo in a lot of ways in terms of the way he turns it over, the mistakes he makes. Although he at times will have a good. Oh God, that's rough. I would say they. Would,
tried to pick challenging people.
They would like Jimmy the majority of the time.
Would they like?
But
Jimmy,
the injuries would suck.
Would you like Jimmy if you just stripped away the name and you take his average? Let's not deal with health or anything here. You're just like, hey, this guy's going to go out here. He's going to play most of the time, whatever, and give you these numbers. You strip away the name Jimmy Garoppolo, most teams would take that.
Well, not to degrade anybody, but Brock Purdy, system-wise, Jimmy does a lot of same things.
Mhm.
They make every single throw, can move in the pocket, both fairly mobile. Not as much anymore for Garoppolo because of all the injuries. And for the most part, made a lot of good decisions.
Mhm.
So
I think Brock's a little bit quicker of a processor than Jimmy.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy, remember when Jimmy first started? When Jimmy first started, the first time he got a start with the Patriots, he was a machine.
He looked great.
He looked like Brady.
He looked incredible.
He looked like he was Brady. There was no difference except for the number.
Michael Penix.
There's going left turning, but that's with all the scramble.
Yep.
Against Nebraska.
Michael Penix.
Yeah, sure.
Wins 55% of their games.
Yeah.
66% completion.
Yeah.
250 yards per game.
Yeah.
2.5 touchdown to interception ratio. 2.5 to 1.
I like that.
We're getting a little higher on that one.
I like all those numbers because I can again say maybe you got drafted by a team that was bad early on, and your first couple of years you won 3 or 4 games, and it's going to hurt you. I like a lot of those stats. I probably
and at where Penix is going to get drafted, probably.
So that's a Raiders or somebody coming up
earliest at the mid-first round.
Yeah,
right?
somebody either dropping back and getting him
because that matters too here, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're drafting somebody 12 versus 2,
yeah,
you feel differently about what you.
I guess so. I mean, Mahomes went 11.
I understand, but Mahomes is the outlier, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, not just. I mean, there's. Yeah.
I know there's a laundry list, but
yeah,
people feel differently depending on where you're drafted.
I probably would
which
feel
maybe isn't fair.
If I got those numbers, I think I'd feel pretty good as long as I know that the guy started his career off losing games because he was on a bad team.
That is Deshaun Watson.
That is Deshaun Watson. Yeah, that makes sense with the couple of years with Houston where they were horrible.
Yeah, where they're very bad. One early and then one at the end of the Bill O'Brien era where they were really bad.
I would not want him.
I wouldn't want the off-field stuff.
I don't want that guy anywhere near me.
I don't want the off-field stuff with Deshaun Watson.
And I voted for him twice for the Heisman.
Really?
Twice.
Yeah.
And I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel pretty good about the way he played in college.
Unbelievable.
I think if you include the bowl games,
he would have won.
He'd have won both.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah.
Especially that last one.
Yeah. I actually thought Deshaun Watson had more turnovers, but I bet you most of those are fumbles more
probably
than thinking about.
Yeah.
I think because he feels pretty turnover prone.
Yeah.
But he made a lot of big plays.
But
they didn't win games.
If you're drafting at like 12.
Yeah. If you got Deshaun Watson at 12.
And you get Deshaun, which he
happy.
Was later, right? He was in that range, I thought. He was later. I thought.
I don't remember.
I'm gonna have to look it up. But if you get that out of Michael Penix, minus the weird affinity for massage therapists, I think you would take that.
Yeah, I would take the production and I would take what he could do. Again, a guy who got out of the pocket and looked to throw.
Mm-hmm.
I love that guy.
Which Penix does.
Which Penix does, but his dramatically drops off under pressure in the pocket because he throws the ball away so quickly.
Yeah.
He doesn't get sacked, but he's got a lot of incompletions when he's got pressure on him.
All right, last one here. Bo Nix.
Yeah.
65% completion.
Yeah.
Won 45% of their games. So that's low number. Low number. 2.5 to 1 touchdown interception ratio. And 245 yards per game.
Okay, and you're talking about getting him like in the 20s. If he goes, I think he's a second rounder easily. But
you're talking, let's say, anywhere from 25 to 40.
So that's Garoppolo. That's where he drafted, right?
Yeah.
So I probably would take those numbers. I mean, losing sucks, but everything else is pretty nice. And 2.5 to 1 is better than 2 to 1. So I probably would take it at that point in second round.
That's Derek Carr.
That's who Derek Carr is. Yeah.
Would you take Derek Carr if you're the team drafting Bo Nix?
Depends on who they are. If I'm the Raiders, say I'm Denver, and all I have is Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. Would I be happier having Derek Carr? I would not like having Derek Carr if there was pressure for him to win, because that's when he's bad. If there's pressure to win, there's no pressure on him, he's a much better quarterback.
That's not a great thing to say about a quarterback.
It's a horrible thing, but it's accurate. We saw it. Now you've seen
I'm not saying you're wrong.
And you've seen it twice now.
I'm not saying
with the Raiders
you're wrong.
And you saw with the Saints. Watch how he plays at the end of the year when all the pressure's off of them. His last 3 games.
Oh, he plays great.
You saw it
much better.
You saw it like 30, 40, 50 times with the Raiders.
Yeah. Well, he got the 1 year where he breaks the ankle, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that year, I think that they had a team that could win the playoffs. But after that, he never was the same in the pocket.
Yeah.
Never was the same in the pocket after he broke his leg.
Got a little
I think so. I really do.
He can't carry a team on his back.
No, he can't. And
that is the 100% the problem with Derek Carr.
He can throw the ball. He really can. But there's times where you watch him and you go, Why are you doing what you're doing? I think it's because of something inside. I don't
Got
think
a
he
little,
has that.
and it broke him a little bit.
He doesn't have that bruh. He's not a bruh.
Doesn't have that dog in
He
him.
don't have the dog in him.
That is our number one. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back with Michael Vandevoort, talk a little Creighton basketball here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We are joined now by Michael Vandevoort of Jays 24/7. Michael, how are you this morning?
Ravi, what's up, man? Things are good. What's going on?
Oh, not too much. Just thought we would check in here to see what's going on. I know there's, I've started talking to these Creighton fans are getting a little nervous that there's not a ton of action going on in the portal. And I know this coaching staff keeps it real tight to the vest, and they really don't give a lot. But I'm curious just what you think they need in terms of replacing guys. Obviously, Baylor Shireman leaves a huge hole. I anticipate Trey Alexander leaving as well. Not sure about anybody else. But as you kind of look at this roster, like, what would you be trying to go out and get?
Yeah, that's pretty large shoes to fill, pretty big gaping holes to go after. I mean, I think you talk to the staff early on, right after the season, and as they kind of think about, you try to go after some guy that's got a little bit of experience and frankly can score the basketball. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Creighton has relied upon is really good shooting through the years, and who can you go find that's played some high level basketball and can make big shots, and then try to fill in around them with kind of this new defensive philosophy that we've seen with Coach McDermott. I think the Kalkbrenner decision is obviously a large one, as you've built the defense around him the last kind of 3 seasons with our drop coverage, and his impending decision is a big one. I sense the panic as well, but I also I have there's just a different trust factor with our staff, and just kind of player assessment, and just this world of unknowns. I mean, there's a lot of stress, I imagine, that they live with, but at the end of the day, we have a pretty darn good freshman class coming in, and a decision between Steven Kalkbrenner and Trey that is a monstrous one.
Michael, I'm curious how you think the impact of Ryan Kalkbrenner coming back or not coming back, how that impacts the rest of the roster construction, right? Because obviously at center, you've got an issue if he doesn't come back, but does it also force you to go get more athletic wing players as well? Because I think they've been able to get away with not as outstanding defenders on the wing because they knew Ryan Kalkbrenner was going to kind of take care of it. Like, am I reading too much into that, or does that impact it as well?
No, I think that's a huge piece. We've been aggressive running teams off the 3-point line, forcing them to take jump shots, and it doesn't always require the greatest athleticism to close out in that kind of form or fashion. And you're going to have to go find guys kind of like Larry Johnson, who's coming in. I mean, 6'5", super long, incredibly athletic, and fill in kind of around that. And I think we've seen it with some of these early guys in the transfer portal that Creighton is rumored to be targeting, and we can come back to that in a little bit, because I think it's worth clearing the air when you see a player mention Creighton's name, not to overreact, because I can tell you guys a story if you want about there was a former kid who he had mentioned not only Creighton but Nebraska, and I remember being near the coaching staff, and I want to say Mac called Hoiberg, and he said, "Have you offered this kid?" And he goes, "No, have you?" He's like, "No, we haven't even talked to him." And they both just kind of laughed, like, "Well, what a way to leverage an opportunity to either get NIL money or pick up better offers." Someone taught him well in negotiations class.
Michael, if you could pick one of these two players based off of the type, right? If you're going to get a portal guy, would you want an AOC guy or would you want a Ryan Hawkins guy in terms of for this team?
Can I get both?
I'll take one of each, please.
Yeah, I think, gosh, that's a really hard question. I love both those guys and what they've done at Creighton. Probably at this stage, with some of just how young we are, I think a guy like Ryan Hawkins just is so dynamite. Not only his leadership skills and how he played basketball, but you talk about a dude that, making all ships rise with the tide. I mean, he was that. He epitomized just leadership. And if you can find that on an annual basis, like, man, your program is going to be so good. And whether he's D3, D2, D1, like, he just made everyone in that office, locker room, facility better.
Michael, you mentioned earlier some guys that Creighton might be targeting. Like I said, I know that the information's being kept pretty tight up on the hilltop there, but are there a few names you've heard? I mean, I know we've all heard about like Frankie Fiddler, and I know there's a couple guys that ended up going other places that Creighton was kind of kicking the tires on as well. But who are some names that you've heard on that you think they might be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, first one and he's on campus right now, Ada Mahaney. If I mispronounced that, forgive me. But
the St. Mary's.
A guy who, St. Mary's point guard, ran the show for Randy Bennett, who I know for a fact is good friends with Coach McDermott, and was actually Randy Bennett helped Coach Doug on some of those USA teams. But really, really good basketball player, high IQ. I mean, has similar attributes to like a Stephen Ashworth. He kind of struggled to shoot it a little bit last year. I'm just looking at his splits now. Like he was 38 from the field and 35 from three, which is good, but that's down from 40 from three in 22-23. I think it's a guy that comes in and you're like, hey man, if you want to score 15 or 18 a night, we're going to need it. We got a spot for you. We got 40 minutes if you can play it. He'd be a good fit, on the big man front. Trayer, who, I don't even know where he started. He ended up at UCSD last year. Freak athlete. I mean, 6'11", jumps out of the gym. That's a guy that, depending on the Kalkbrenner decision, lets you play the drop coverage, continue what that world looks like. The kid from Duke, he may end up going back home. I think he's a Chicago kid. It's a Jaden Shutt, but kind of a similar AOC type of story. But these you got all these 5-stars that come in and play over you, and you're kind of shocked and surprised. But it's those schools turn into the flavor of the week. It's like who's coming in. You better be really good, otherwise you're not going to find a lot of time. So and then Frankie. It's funny because you try to search and see what's going on the NIL front. And, I heard Chucky's number was like 750,000 at Louisville. I always take a little grain of salt with those, and I hope the people do too. But it just kind of gives you a sense of this isn't NIL. This is free agency. Like you're not recruiting on name, image, likeness. You're recruiting on how big of a check can you write. And that's honestly why, Calipari at Arkansas is going to be really, really scary.
We guys talk a lot about the Kalkbrenner decision. Is it really a decision? I mean, we know what the league is now for big men like him. He's going to be in the G League making $35,000. He makes more here, right? Is it really a decision?
Yeah, I think there's two factors, honestly. One is if I'm, selfishly, I want Ryan back, right? I think everyone in Omaha wants him back. He's got to look at this hurts to say what Ballo did, and if he really got $1.2 million from Indiana, I mean, Kalkbrenner's worth that, maybe not more. So it's the decision is like, hey, Creighton, how much can we get to you from an NIL standpoint? And then I know Ryan, he's going to talk to his fiance Rachel, and
sure.
they're gonna weigh over this a lot. And he's, I think with Ryan, he's got the right people around him helping him make decisions. He signed a really good agent, which the team over at Priority Sports has been good for him. And so I honestly don't even know if it's an NBA versus college thing. I think this is a
portal. Got it.
Do I stay at Creighton or do I enter the portal? As much as it kills me to say that.
Right.
We're talking with Michael Vandevoort of Jays 24/7. Michael, you've mentioned a couple times the incoming freshman class, which I think is sort of the untalked about portion of this equation for Creighton's roster building, right? For all the hand-wringing about the transfer portal, Creighton is bringing in, I believe, the number 12 recruiting class in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. Like, how does that weigh into this whole transfer portal situation, right? Because if you're a two guard or a wing and you look at like, okay, am I going to play over Larry Johnson? And if I do, how long am I going to play over Larry Johnson? Like, some of these guys might be looking at it and say, oh, am I not just walking into a slightly different situation than I was trying to leave if they're these guys leaving these high majors that got played over?
100%. I think this is the, you got to put the patience and trust in the staff to perform the evaluations and find guys who almost have a different maturity level and, can come in and say, hey, look, I want to be a part of, this is a reload, right? This isn't a rebuild. Let's help raise this freshman class. Let's continue to help Jason and Isaac and Mason develop, and, whatever other pieces decide to come back. I want to be a part of this team and keep this kind of Sweet 16 run rocking and rolling. So it's different in a sense of you have not necessarily the 5-star guys, but you have some incredibly talented dudes coming in who are capable of playing. I watched some Jackson highlights from their state tournament run, and
he's really, really
good.
He's really good.
Really shoot.
He's really, really good.
And yeah, a guy like Larry, like we've never had a dude like him.
No, I think he might be the most athletic player that Creighton's ever recruited, at least in the modern era. He's a freak, like a wholesale freak.
It's a maturity thing, and I guess my wisdom to fans is like, just, I don't want to say trust the process, but trust the staff, trust that this hire of Trey Ziegler, who I absolutely love. I mean, talking to players and their relationships with him, that's a huge benefit to everyone in the locker room, having him back.
Yeah, I read that story that was written in the World Herald 2 years ago about him and how much he helped Trey Alexander with his shooting. Is that kind of his forte, is helping with shooting?
I think the shooting front, and the guy loves film from everyone I've talked to, and kind of helping pick apart, opponents' tendencies. Some of these new softwares have made it really quite easy to kind of dissect who you're playing, who you're guarding, what your matchup looks like. And so as you get into the meat and potatoes of conference season and NCAA tournament, like understanding tendencies is so critical. And Trey just he's young. And I think what gets lost in some of this, whatever college, professional, NCAA you want to call this, is like, these kids are 20 years old. They're going to class. They have girlfriends. Like, having a guy who can kind of be the middleman between your coaching staff and the players, and just he's your confidant, that you can come to him with whatever you want, and he's going to have a conversation, because he just lived that life, and he's lived the professional life, and now he's got incredible intelligence and a gift to help make these guys, basically grow these kids into men.
Michael Vandevoort of Jays 24/7. Michael, we appreciate your time, and let's just be a little patient here. Let's let the process play out a little bit. I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Deep breath is crucial here.
Michael, we appreciate it. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
That's Michael Vandevoort of Jays 24/7. Good stuff there. I do think there's, and we don't have to stay on Creighton too long here, but I do think there's I know Michael's he might be the biggest Creighton fan in the city. So
that's the first time I ever heard of Michael Vandevoort.
he's wearing their slogan on his shirt there, "Let it fly." So, is that not what that is?
They had that slogan Mike Miller had that slogan when he made an energy drink. That's where it comes from.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you a hard
Yeah,
time.
no, it's fine. I mean, whatever.
He's big Jays fan, Michael Severe.
I hope they do wonderful. Hope they do great.
No, but I do think there's a world in which Creighton kind of just maybe decides like, okay, if we don't find the right pieces in the portal, we're just going to ride with the young guys, because it's not a situation where
and Steven, who's not young,
right? And Steven, I think Ryan Kalkbrenner's coming back. I really do.
Steven's not going anywhere. His wife's got a business.
Yeah,
she's not gonna. She starts a business. She's not gonna go. Let's leave. No,
he didn't even walk on senior day. Like Stephen Ashworth is going to be here.
Yeah, he's.
Ryan Kalkbrenner, I think, is going to be back. I've thought that for most of this time.
Yeah.
I heard in like early March that was the direction it was leaning.
What's his fiance doing? Soon to be, they'll be married in 2 months.
She was working here in town. I don't know what.
Okay, she's not playing anymore, right?
No, I don't think so.
So, okay.
So that's not really a factor.
Yeah.
But so I think Kalkbrenner's coming back. You've got Mason Miller, who's played a lot.
Yep.
Jason Green, who I like and started playing more at the end of last year.
Yeah.
You've got Isaac Trout, who's got a year under his belt now, and I think is going to start to remake his body a little bit.
We'll going to get athletic.
I think he needs to play the 5.
Yeah.
I think
I know.
I think you just turn him into a 6'10" Rogge and say, let's go.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way forward.
Right.
And that I think could actually work. He's certainly not going to end up being a 3, which I think some people thought he might have been coming out of high school. That's not a thing.
No.
And unless he dramatically transforms his body and kind of gets back to some of because he was a better athlete in high school than he showed last year. So unless he gets back to that a little bit,
right.
I don't know that a 4 is in the cards. I do think he could be really interesting as a stretch 5, as either backup to Kalkbrenner.
I think that's the only spot.
Yeah, and he's a matchup nightmare at that spot.
Right. He certainly shouldn't ever play ahead of Jason Green anymore.
No, I mean, especially the way defensively Jason Green played. So it's not like a few years ago when the class of Kalkbrenner and Nemhard and Alexander and Kaluma came in. And Kalkbrenner was a sophomore, I guess, that year. But
yeah, and Mason Miller was in that class too. But
yeah, and he redshirted.
Yep.
But you had these guys that you're basically like, hey, we're just starting all over. Right. It's not that. Right. So you put in maybe Larry Johnson in the Trey Alexander spot, and maybe. I think Jason Green can play the 3. I know people tell me I'm crazy.
Well, he can actually shoot the 3. If you look back at high school,
yes,
he was like a 38% three-point shooter.
He can shoot a little bit. He can stretch the floor. And I keep going back to this, and I know it's probably a mental thing more than anything, but go watch that UConn tape at home.
Yeah.
He gave Stephon Castle, who is a top 5 lock as a 3 in the NBA draft, he gave Stephon Castle everything he could handle defensively. Like watch those two. Mm-hmm. Stephon Castle doesn't get anything
but his
off of Jason Green.
Best part of his game is his defense.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great defender. I don't think he's I look in the mock drafts. I'm shocked that he's going that high. I think he's so limited offensively, but he's a great defender.
I'm also shocked he's going that high.
In this league, it's making
sense.
But
for his athletic profile, the fact that Jason Green could just basically stand in front of him and be like, let's go.
Defender. Yeah.
I'm okay with playing Jason Green at the 3. I know people have kind of panicked about that.
No, he's fine.
But if you've got, especially if you play like Trout, end up playing Trout some at the 5, you have shooting so many other places. You can get away with having a not Baylor Shireman at the 3 in terms of a shooter. And again, I think he's a better shooter than people give him credit for.
And he's going to get better.
And maybe Trey Ziegler's like, hey, let's make it, let's take a little jump too.
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
I think the roster is not nearly in as dire of shape as people tend to think it is. Now, if Ryan Kalkbrenner says tomorrow that he's leaving either for portal, like Michael Vandevoort said, or for the NBA to see how try his chances there, then we're having a different conversation. But until then, I don't mind what the roster looks like, even if they don't add anybody. That's just me though.
Right.
And also Jackson McAndrew is really, 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 really good. Like really good.
Okay.
That dude, if he's physically ready, because that was the issue with Mason, right?
Yeah.
Needed to put on a little bit of weight. If Jackson McAndrew physically is ready to play, he will play day 1. Like he's that good.
I don't believe in any of them until they actually play in college.
That's all right.
I can project a guy from high school to college football. The projecting a guy from high school basketball.
I actually think it's easier in basketball.
I don't think it. I watch so many guys. Go look at the top 25 list over the course of the last. Bill Simmons went through this. There's a lot of guys they just miss on. They just miss. Either their game doesn't translate to college, or they're not tough enough, or most times they get in trouble. But I mean,
we can go through this.
Yeah.
The top 25, I don't know. But if you go top 10 for top 10 in football versus basketball's more accurate.
Oh, no, I agree. No, I'm talking about how when you're judging them, I can judge a high school football player much better than I can judge a high school basketball.
Yeah.
It's not even close to me.
For me personally,
and you're talking about quarterbacks too, because all those quarterbacks end up getting in that top part, and translating quarterbacks is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah, but when it comes to offensive linemen and wide receivers, and those
a lot of those guys, they've gotten really good at wide receivers.
They translate
recently.
those, but it's bad for quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's always has been.
And they get moved to other positions,
different positions, and especially the super athletic guys. And
but
no, I for me personally, and I coach basketball, so it was a little different. It's what I scouted high school. That's what I did.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's way easier to translate to high school basketball than football. But I also just understand basketball a little bit better. But no, good stuff there for Michael Vandevoort. We appreciate him joining us. We are going to talk some more NFL draft. I did want to ask, because we were doing this quarterback exercise earlier.
Yeah.
And you off air a couple times, like you're kind of talking about this list of things you go through.
Right. Five things I think.
So when you're looking at a quarterback, because I know you used to get deep. I don't know if you're going 600 guys deep.
I don't get that deep. I never got that deep. The guy had the 500 list. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, there's not. Right. Those guys aren't playing in the UFL.
Those guys should be going back to school.
those guys are going to be insurance salesmen.
Yeah.
But let's go through the list. Like, what are the things that you're looking for?
The first one is relatively silly. I've talked about it before. Yeah. I don't want a guy that's got narrow shoulders.
I don't know that's silly.
I want a guy who can support his pads. I want a guy with.
So that would be your concern on Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy.
No, actually, Jaden Daniels actually has good shoulders. McCarthy doesn't.
Okay.
So Daniels is actually built like a guy who should be bigger.
He just hasn't put the weight on.
I think his metabolism doesn't allow it. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Maybe we'll see it. But if you watch who's
he's super lean,
who's slighter, it's actually Kathy. McCarthy. So that's my first one. That's just something that's my pick. The four that involve on the field is.
I don't think that's crazy though, because if guys are really, really narrow,
right,
they have a hard time staying healthy.
Yeah, or they don't have the strength in the pocket to be able to get off of guys and get guys off of them.
Yeah, when they're getting
many plays come down to you being able to break a tackle or be able to get out of a bump. If you get knocked off your spot by everybody who hits you,
you're never
not
going to
get
succeed.
Anything. You can't.
Maybe like a Zach Wilson issue.
Zach is a good example of that. You know who's a good example of that would be from college is actually Bo Nix at times.
Oh, okay.
Bo Nix at times,
which I don't look at him as a small guy.
Knocked off of his spot, and you'll see it, and his body gets moved really easily. So I don't know what his weight is, but he gets moved easily. But so the four
that's number one.
The four on the field is you got to be able to throw to the middle of the field.
Yeah, sure.
And they chart all that now, and it's really easy to find. So many of these guys do not throw the ball over the middle of the field. So many of these
harder
guys
to see.
It's hard to see, and you have confidence. You have to have confidence the ball's not going to get tipped. You have confidence you're not going to float the ball. You have a whole bunch of different things, and reads too.
Yeah.
Usually that's not your first read unless it's the tight end. So that's a big one as well. You want to take a break and come back?
Yeah, we'll come back with the other four here in just a second. That's Michael Vandevoort. I'm Ravi Lulla. We're live at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We'll be back in a minute.
We'll be back. We will 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 be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's Michael Vandevoort. I'm Ravi Lulla, live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and from the Pillar Exterior Stage, which is located here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, which is where you can also find the Team Jack Live event coming up on Friday, April 26th. 5 p.m. doors open, 5:30 p.m. the show starts. Go to eventbrite.com, search for Team Jack for tickets. All proceeds from that evening and event will go to Team Jack Foundation. And guess what? Some of your more recent Husker heroes will be in the house. Amir Abdullah, Kenny Bell, Nate Geary, all here in the same room. I'm guessing for the first time since they played at Nebraska. Nathan. Oh, sorry, Nathan.
He doesn't like being called Nate.
Nathan Geary. My apologies.
Nathan. Yeah.
We're not as friendly as.
No,
Nathan. I understand. Nathan Geary. He will be here with Kenny Bell and Amir Abdullah on Friday. Make sure you go to eventbrite.com, search for Team Jack to go ahead and get those tickets. That'll be a 5:30 p.m. start right here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill.
And while you're here, watch the second round and third round of the NFL draft. Is that Friday, right?
Yeah. Big NFL draft guys here. And we were talking about your quarterback qualifiers. First one, narrow shoulders.
I don't like the sloping shoulders.
Don't like the sloping shoulders. Second one, I forgot already.
Got to be able to throw the ball across the middle.
Across the middle.
You have to
that's
be able.
right.
And there's guys that. So Jaden Daniels hasn't done it much,
Mhm.
and he's not short. He's 6'3", not great at it. Actually, the quarterback that's been the best in terms of the numbers is JJ McCarthy.
Throw a
He
ball
don't
across the middle.
care.
Yeah.
He makes so many throws across the middle where guys aren't turned yet,
Mhm.
where defenders are in the way. I don't know if that is a confidence thing or just luck,
Mhm.
but he makes a ton of those throws. He throws across the middle as well as anybody.
Because you have to in the NFL. You can't live on
Yeah.
the perimeters.
You
in the
can't
NFL.
live on the perimeters. You've got to be able to make those throws. And what's the most valuable thing in the red zone, right?
Yeah.
Usually it's either a jerk route from a running back or a tight end getting in the end zone. Yeah, you can throw your fades, but that doesn't
I hate
that
fades.
great percentage. I know
I hate fades.
Since Harold Carmichael, it hasn't been great for the fades. But anyway, so that's a big one. My other one is we talked about throwing to your left.
Mhm.
And that's
If you're right-handed.
throwing right-handed quarterbacks.
Throw into your
left.
weak side.
Yeah, you've got to be able to open up your hips. You've got to be able
So we're
to
talking not on scrambles, just in the
I'm
pocket.
just talking about from the pocket, throw into your left. There's been so many quarterbacks over the years that the percentage dropped off dramatically.
Mhm.
And JJ McCarthy, by the way, cannot throw to his left very well.
Mhm.
And everybody struggles. It's harder.
Yeah.
You're open, you're closed.
Mhm.
It's simple. So that's a big one for me. You got to be able to show me.
You can open your hips up.
And if you go back and watch JJ McCarthy stuff, the times that I've seen him throw to his left, it was on scrambles.
Mhm.
That's it. He had a touchdown against Nebraska doing that. But the majority of the time, he can't make that throw.
Is there a guy in this class that you look at and say, he does a good job opening
Caleb
up?
Williams.
Does a good job
Because
opening up?
of his base.
Yeah.
He's open a lot of times.
Yeah.
He
doesn't have like that traditional
That's
closed.
the Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre. They come open sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're open with your feet. And so it's not much
So they're
to throw.
almost like facing the field as opposed to being.
Yeah, you don't have. And even Mahomes obviously has changed everything about the way you throw the ball, but he's the same thing. A lot of times he'll be open. And so it makes it easier to do that. So that's a big thing that Caleb Williams does very well. So you got to be able, I don't want sloping shoulders. You got to be able to throw over the middle. You got to be able to throw to your left. Let me see your percentage when you are under pressure. Let me see where it drops off because everybody's going to drop off. And I'm talking about blitzing. That's different. There's two different stats. How do you do against the blitz?
Yeah.
And how do you do in muddy pocket?
Because blitz, you're going to have somebody's going to be open.
Oh,
right?
no doubt.
So a lot of guys do well against the blitz,
especially if you get good pre-read.
Because
you see it coming.
If you're good at reading what's happening, you can get rid of the ball. You never actually gets to a muddy pocket.
Yeah, like for example, Bo Nix has a really good number against the blitz,
Mhm.
but and he's not the only one.
Mhm.
When Michael Penix is the worst at this. If he's in the pocket and there's people at his feet, it's going to drop off dramatically in terms of his completion percentage. And that's just the way it is. Like I said, he doesn't take sacks because he throws the ball away. A lot of times he's throwing the ball away when that pocket's gotten muddy. So yes, his percentage drops off. That's just going to happen. That's just the way it's going to be. It's not something that's going to be perfect. There's nobody in this draft that I can look at and say in a muddy pocket, like who's great at that was Tom Brady.
Sure.
You ever watch how many times guys were at Tom Brady's feet?
Yep.
And he managed to step the right way or move just perfectly. Obviously, Peyton Manning was very good at it. It's a rare quality.
It's that like pocket presence.
Drew
people
Brees
talk
was good
about,
at it,
right?
especially since he could move up and
climbing the pocket.
The Saints always spent money on their guards and their center because they knew that he had to climb the pocket, and he was very good at it. But those guys that can do that very well, I give them all the credit in the world. And another guy who does that, by the way, is Caleb Williams. He's very good at that. The other guy who's really good at it really is Drake May. If you look at Drake May's numbers when they count under pressure, he makes a lot of big boy throws. And part of that is he's a big fella.
Yeah, really big dude.
He's Josh Allen when Josh Allen was at Wyoming.
A lot of people,
he's that size.
A lot of people throw the Justin Herbert comparison at him.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's quite as mobile as Herbert.
That's funny because I think Drake May is much better athlete than Herbert. Remember, Drake May was a great basketball player in high school.
Yeah, Herbert ran more in college, though.
He ran a little bit, and especially when it came against the game against Nebraska where they ran. But Drake May can do that. Drake May's a good athlete.
Fair.
Yeah, like I don't know exactly what star ranking he was as a basketball player, but he was up there.
Yeah.
He was a really good basketball player. He's a good athlete. And so he does that really well as well. So sloping shoulders, being able to throw across the middle, being able to throw left, and handle how you are when you're under pressure. My last thing.
That's 4.
That's 4. My last thing is, and this is kind of goes back to a bunch of different quarterbacks watching over the years, is that I want to see where your release point is. I don't care how you get there.
Low.
I don't care how you get there.
Just where it actually lets
I don't
go.
care where you get there. If you're, and I always talk about this. I was completely wrong on Phillip Rivers because of the way he pushed the ball. I just thought in the pros, can you be able to make tight throws pushing the ball? But if you look at where his release point got to when he got rid of it, it actually was pretty good. And obviously he's 6'5", so it helps a little bit.
Yeah.
But there are guys who are big whose release
Who
point are
release
low,
low.
who bring themselves down.
Yeah.
And there's guys like Russell Wilson who was
Throws it
short,
way up here.
who threw it way over the top. Drew Brees threw it way over the top. So let me just see where your release point is based off of your height.
Mhm.
So if you are a short guy that's got a high release point, I'm going to give you some credit for that. If you are a big guy who's got a low release point, I'm going to take something away because you're going to get balls knocked down.
So what do you do with a guy like Caleb Williams, who's not a huge guy in
No.
terms of stature?
They say he's 6'1".
They say that.
And if you look at him in the Heisman pictures, maybe he is.
Maybe.
But I don't know what kind of shoes he had on.
Sure. I'll call him 6 foot, maybe
Okay.
give him 6'1" in shoes.
Yep.
But
And nobody plays barefoot.
not that I'm aware of.
So 6'1" in cleats.
Occasionally some kickers did.
That is true. Yeah, one
back
guy,
in the
Tony
day.
Franklin. Yeah.
but his release points, because of the way he plays, are all over the point. Are you talking about just in the pocket?
I want to see him
Where
in the
that-
pocket. Actually, not just in the pocket, because one of the things that Caleb Williams does really well
Because he
is
adjusts.
he bails opposite.
Yeah.
Right? He's really good at bail opposite. Who's great at that? Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Who was great at that? Aaron Rodgers.
Mhm.
Bails opposite. Watch how he does when he has to square his shoulders. Watch him. He will get his shoulder squared. He will get the ball up, and he will get rid of it.
Mm.
Now, there's times when you're in the pocket and you've got to do a quick smoke route and you got to throw it
Yeah, you just
sidearm
gotta do
and
a
you don't
little-
even have the strings.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
That's fine. But the laces,
But
that's
your
fine.
typical-
But I want to see what you look like when you have to throw over that offensive line.
Mm.
And guys who are defensively getting their hands up. So those are
So
five
those
big
are your
things for me.
5 things. Is there one of those that if you're looking at a prospect, because I assume nobody has all 5,
No, I don't believe everybody does everything perfect. No.
right? So even like not just in this class, but in general.
You know who did it perfectly, and he obviously hasn't had the career, but if you watch Trevor Lawrence, almost everything I
That's my
ask
guy.
you to do, almost everything I ask you to do,
He can do.
He can do.
Yeah.
He was a broad-shouldered guy.
Yep.
Could throw to his left. Matter of fact, if you watch any of the national championship or
Ton of throws to his
ton of to the left, he just got over there and got the ball out of his hands and got it and didn't throw it high, which is what happens
Yeah.
a lot of times. To those
Sails
guys.
on you
Sails on it. Yeah. So
because your feet aren't right.
and he threw across the middle a ton. Man, one of the biggest plays against Georgia. Right.
Good high release point.
Yeah. Everything he did, Alabama, everything he did was perfect. Now he hasn't had the career, obviously. Injuries a part of that. He's had talent around him.
Mhm.
Maybe it's coaching. Obviously, the 1 year it was coaching, but
the 1 year where he had was Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
His first year with Doug Peterson, he had his best year.
he had his best year. Yeah.
Um,
And he stayed healthy that whole year. Yeah.
So you might say that Trevor Lawrence might be a generational talent.
I think Trevor Lawrence is if I was going to put it on a board and I was going to write all the pluses for him,
Yeah.
and then a little bit of negatives and his size and everything, this guy should be great.
Yeah, his pluses are way dramatically outweigh his
Yeah.
negative.
But I don't know what his
But
I hate this because they talk about, but you got to figure out how much somebody really loves the game.
well, yeah, so that's why
Like, is it everything? to
like
you?
talent and production are different things, right?
Yes,
You
yeah.
could be super talented,
Yeah.
and if you're, I mean, it might even just be like mentally he doesn't have the, whether it's preparation, whether it's the love of
Right.
football, whatever it is, right?
Right.
You might just not have it where it translates to NFL success.
Yeah.
Whereas like a Tom Brady, good talent, not extraordinary talent,
Hard worker.
but is a absolute obsessive freak.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? Like
With
that
everything.
that takes you to a whole different level
Yeah.
because you're going to get every ounce of ability
Yeah.
out of yourself and you're going to maximize production, right?
Right.
Also went into a perfect situation. Like that's the other thing. Situational.
Think of the situation he went into. He went into a situation where the starting quarterback had just gotten a contract extension. The starting quarterback was a former number 1 overall pick.
Mhm.
He was the 199th pick.
Mhm.
It was a good situation because he had a great coach
Yes.
and a great defense, but it was a tough
But
situation.
he also had time.
He
he
did.
had-
I mean,
he
the
had
injury.
time
The injury happens
in year
and he's
2,
got to come in
But
year
he had
2.
a year and a
Yeah.
half to
Yeah.
figure his stuff out. He's
Yeah.
not in a situation like
Yeah.
where like
I think it was only like game 3 or 4 where.
but he had a full
went
year
down.
before
Yeah,
that.
yeah, he did.
A full year like
Yeah, and he needed it too because he was in bad shape.
kind of like
He
Mahomes.
didn't look good.
Mahomes needed the
Yeah.
full year
Yeah.
under Andy Reid. Like
Watching Alex Smith prepare.
none of
too.
these guys we're talking about
Yeah.
are going to get a full year.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
You don't think so? Or you think they might?
I don't know.
We'll talk about
Okay.
that.
We will be back. be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla. I want to remind you, using your seatbelt saves lives and prevents injuries only if it is worn properly. Make it click. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office.
Look at a ticket.
Yeah, don't get a ticket. Also,
although it's a secondary violation, which it shouldn't be. It should be
stay alive.
Yep, definitely. Stay alive.
More concerned about staying alive
Stay
than
alive.
a ticket.
Stay alive.
Get that thing clicked in there. We were talking about the first round quarterbacks and had a little disagreement here because I think just the nature of the life cycle of coaches, the nature of the way the NFL has gone, I think anybody that goes in the first round, with maybe the exception of Bo Nix if he climbs into the first round.
Drake May, I'm telling you.
I think
he starts day one.
Not
at New England.
Maybe not day one. I think they will start. I'm going to say all of these guys, the top 5 guys, will start at least 8 games each, barring injury.
J.J. McCarthy's not starting 8 games for anybody. No way.
So let's say he goes.
Unless all of the other quarterbacks got COVID and they couldn't play and they had to start a wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, then maybe. He's not.
So we're talking about either
I don't think
somebody trading up to get J.J. McCarthy,
which would be probably
4, which is Minnesota maybe.
Vikings are the one they talk about.
Or you're looking.
It could even be 6 though.
Yeah, you're looking at the Giants.
The Giants,
at 6.
you could see saying to themselves, you know what? We need more picks. We're going with Daniel Jones, so we'll move back and maybe make a move in the second round.
You've got possibly the Raiders moving up to.
Penix has been tied a lot to the Raiders.
He
a lot
has.
Of people say that,
but maybe they like McCarthy better and think they can move up to 6 to
Certainly,
get him.
Yeah.
That's not out of the question. The Falcons figured out there with Kirk Cousins,
they got
at
Kirk
least
Cousins.
short term.
Yep. And they spent a lot of money for him.
Yeah, so they're not drafting in the first round.
Him. No.
Maybe they take a flyer on somebody later, but that's not a first round option. After Minnesota, and you got Minnesota at 11,
right?
And you've got the Raiders. At 9.
No, 10. I thought Tennessee was at. Tennessee's at 7. 9 is
the Bears. Bears have their second one.
The second wide receiver. Yeah.
The Raiders at 12.
12, right.
So you've got 11, 12. After that, you kind of have there's not a ton of teams in there.
This is the spot where you move up if somebody's dropping. Like we've seen it before.
You move up to 11 or 12 to go get one of those
like
quarterbacks.
A Mac Jones is dropping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
10, 11, 12.
Like that's one of those. But I look at these guys, especially the top 4 guys. I think McCarthy included in there.
Okay.
And I'm going to include Penix as well. I think all those guys start at least half the season. Just because, and I'm not saying they should.
I think they start half the season if there's also horrible production from the guy in front of them. So
Which
if there's
most of these places have, right? That's why they're drafting a quarterback.
And I mean horrible. Like I'm not talking about a team that goes 8-9. I'm talking about a team that's winning 1 or 2 games. But then you have to figure out yourself. You have to say, is it worth me putting this guy in to take a beating as a rookie? Because I know some guys have succeeded. It's broken more quarterbacks than it's not.
I agree. But that's generally not something that they seem to factor for anymore. They seem to just throw the guys out there.
Excuse me. It depends on who your coach is and the situation he's in.
Right.
Like how much, like Jared Mayo's obviously got he's got some leeway.
You would think he's got some equity with the franchise. He's in year one.
Yeah, so maybe.
But like Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams starts right away.
The number 1 guy, the majority of the time,
starts right away.
Has to start right away.
So number 2, you're looking at either Jaden Daniels or Drake May to Washington, right?
Right.
They don't have a great quarterback situation.
They do not.
It is Marcus Mariota, I think.
Yeah, it is Marcus Mariota.
Who looks like he would be the starter.
Right.
To me.
And that's why he said he went there.
Yeah.
He went there thinking that maybe he'd have a chance to be a starter because maybe they're not going to stick a rookie in to play right away.
But we've all seen what Marcus Mariota is.
Sure.
Outside of the preseason.
Right. Good preseason player, boy. Solid preseason player.
That guy puts up numbers. That's like NBA Summer League. Is like,
exactly.
Hey,
yeah.
This guy was a baller in the NBA.
I would say there are
Summer
more guys playing during the preseason that actually are going to play than in the Summer League. But yes.
Similar concept, though, right?
Right.
And so I think whoever Washington takes starts right away. If not right away,
I don't think
starts the majority of the season.
I don't think Jaden Daniels starts right away.
Regardless of where he goes?
And with Washington.
What if he goes to
New England? I don't think either one. New England, the one I'm most confident about is New England. I think New England realizes what they have on their offensive line and they literally don't have starting tackles that are good enough to play.
Yeah.
I don't believe they're going to put that rookie quarterback back behind them.
So let's talk about New England for a second here.
Yeah.
Because there's been some chatter kind of throughout this whole process that they're willing to move out of 3.
It makes sense. You got a lot more needs.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of needs.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's say they move out of 3 and fall back to that 11, 12 range where maybe they think they can get Penix. Would you rather them take Penix, get, let's say, a couple, 3, 4 picks somewhere out in this year's draft, next year's draft, and start filling some of those other holes? Do you think the drop-off between Penix at 12 and whoever they get at 3 is enough that they wouldn't want to move out of that or that they should move out of that?
I think the amount you can get at 3 based off of the team that's offering is too hard to pass up at times. But if I'm them, I take May and I sit him a year. And then he's my future. And it allows me also with that to be able to make some moves after that to try to better my team. Offensive line, but secondary again, because they made so many mistakes in preseason. I mean, in free agency. I got to get wide receivers that he can throw the ball to. Maybe that involves a trade. Maybe somebody out there decides they're going to go get a Ayuk or somebody like that.
You leave Brandon Ayuk alone.
I think he shouldn't.
You leave him alone.
I would not take a 26-year-old who's getting ready to get a huge contract. I'm not giving up a high pick for that.
Yeah.
I'm just not doing that. That's not the way my value system works in the NFL. But they can do that, make some moves there. I would draft him at 3 if he's there, Drake May, and I would sit him a year.
If it's Daniels at 3, does that change your equation at all?
A little bit. I think Daniels is farther ahead in terms of being ready to play because of his crazy mobility than Drake May, who is a very good athlete. I think he's more ready to play.
You think Jane Daniels is more ready to play?
I think he's more ready to play.
Okay.
Because also,
but you wouldn't trade out either way.
You're talking about a guy who's 23. I think Daniels is 23.
Yeah.
And
because he started over at Arizona
State.
Yeah.
Did the years there and then came over to LSU. I think
he's older.
He's older, and I think he also has seen a lot more. I would trust him starting ahead of Drake May.
So I'm glad you brought up the age thing here because, I meant
it's not basketball.
No, I meant no. I don't care about that.
Because age is much more important in basketball.
Yeah, if you're 23 in basketball, you might as well just go. You might as well just get your passport.
You're through your first contract already.
Yeah, get your passport and go to Europe right now because they're never taking a look at you,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
If you can legally drink, they're not interested in you in the NBA anymore.
Right.
But there was an article in the Athletic I think it was yesterday. It came out where these NFL coaches are talking about NFL coaches, GMs, whoever are talking about the impact of NIL on the draft process.
Okay.
And so I'm looking at guys like Jane Daniels, and they're basically the takeaway is like, oh, these guys got money in college, so they're entitled now, and whatever, and all this other stuff, right?
Okay, they always got money in college, by the way.
Yeah, it's just now everybody knows about it.
Legal.
It's legal and whatever, right? And maybe there's a little more of it, maybe there's not, whatever. But one of the things that I'm talking about here is okay. So if you draft some of these guys that come out are 2021 in their third year, they're coming out super young.
Caleb Williams, right?
Yeah. Super young guy. There's been
who made $12 million last year.
Yes. But you've got guys that are coming out early, even before Caleb Williams. So I'm saying before they made the money.
Sure.
So they'd be getting their second contract at 25.
Yep.
25 years old.
Yep.
You've got guys coming out now who stayed in college a couple extra years and had COVID that are 23, 24.
Yep.
So that guy coming out of college is entitled, according to these guys.
Right.
But the 25-year-old getting a second contract worth more money than any of these guys saw in college is not entitled. So it's not a problem there.
Well, wouldn't you rather have a guy who's already dealt with money? If you've never had money and somebody gives
100%.
you a bag, you probably don't handle it well. These
Jamarcus Russell.
Well, that was a problem with drinking syrup, too. That was his issue.
He had a lot of issues.
Syrup. He had a lot of issues.
But you're right.
Weight problem. But yeah, I'd rather have a guy who's already had the bag. So when he gets to the league, that's not something that's going to blow his mind and make him go crazy.
Yes.
He's already done all that stuff. He's already done his money thing.
And so I think it's a positive.
Yeah, experience is always a positive.
Both with money and playing time.
Yep.
Right?
Snaps.
And the other thing is I actually think it's better for the NFL product too, because instead of going in and getting these guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th round that can go be your either like kind of non-money positions, your middle linebackers, some of the like backup guards, stuff like that, you're paying veterans to do that now because they're not available in the draft.
Right.
And the veterans right now are better than the rookies coming in.
Sure.
You're going to get a better NFL product
right.
because guys are staying in college longer.
I completely agree.
Both because you're paying veterans and because when those guys finally come out, they're going to be better than they were.
Yeah.
Because instead of being 22, they're 24, and now they're actually sort of ready to play in the NFL.
Old people always going to say stuff like that.
Yeah, they're dumb.
It's what we do.
It's really
We're
dumb.
Old people will be like, oh, that's not how it
Back
was
in my day,
when I was coming up. So
they're so entitled.
They're always going to do that.
Is it better for the player to have the experience, like when it comes to starting right away in the NFL, as in the experience being in the system, or is it better for the player just to have experience age-wise, with the extra years with COVID?
Well, you go through the rules, right? The Bill Parcells rules. And he wanted a certain amount of starts. And he wanted
like 20 year.
It was over 30, I think.
Oh, was it?
He wanted a
That's a lot.
He wanted a 3-year starter, even if you redshirted. So he didn't even want the redshirted Ben Roethlisberger.
Oof.
He wanted a guy who had started 3 full years.
Yeah, that's not practical anymore.
Right. So he wanted that. He also wanted a guy who finished like first, second, third team in his conference. So he wanted guys that had success, and he wanted a certain amount of wins. He wanted winners. So
which I can understand.
You look at McCarthy, for example. Like Tony says, I agree with Michael on J.D. McCarthy. Jake Locker. I would never say he's Jake Locker. Okay. Didn't like Jake Locker coming in. Jake Locker had some other problems. Didn't really love the game. Had some injuries. Didn't know how much he wanted to play. We saw Jake Locker get absolutely destroyed by very good defenses in college. McCarthy has, again, lost 1 game in the 4 years he's been a starter in high school and college. So I don't think he's Jake Locker.
Right.
I think he's got a lot of things he's got to do before he is ready to be a full-time starter in the NFL.
Fair.
Not Jake Locker. Not him. I would never call him Jake Locker.
I think a lot of guys.
I think he could be Brock Purdy in the right system.
I think a lot of these guys have a lot they need to do, but that doesn't mean they're not going to start right away.
Maybe.
That's the problem.
Maybe.
Like should and would are different things.
You got to figure out what your return on investment is. If you get a better return on investment by sitting the guy and letting him learn and fixing stuff in front of him, you got to go with that.
But you and I both know a lot of these teams are way more short-sighted than that.
Sure.
And that's where you end up having problems with these guys starting too early. Coming up next, we're going to talk more NFL draft with Ryan Roberts here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome to the NFL Draft.
I don't compare myself to the other guys. I think I'm my own player, and I tend to like to, create history and rewrite history.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla on the Pillar Exterior stage. We are joined now by Ryan Roberts of RiseNDraft.com. also does the First Team pod covering the NFL draft. Ryan, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, guys. I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing well also. A lot of debates on the NFL draft this morning. And the one that we just came off of, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. We're trying to figure out how many of the first-round quarterbacks or first, early, second-round quarterbacks, if you want to throw Bo Nix in there, depending on where you think he's going to go, how many of those guys do you think start more than half of their games in year one?
Wow, that's a great question. Wow. Okay. So I think Caleb Williams will obviously be pressed into that conversation. I think Jane Daniels will. Drake May probably more than likely. JJ could, but I think JJ McCarthy would be a guy that would be best served with a little bit of a, kind of a maturation process from the sideline early on. I'll say 4, though, to be safe. I think 4 players, if we're throwing a Bo Nix or Michael Penix potentially into that conversation as well. I think both of those guys are obviously more mature passers and guys that could step in. Their ceilings may not be as high as a J.J. McCarthy, for instance, who's kind of viewed as the quarterback 4 in this class. But I think overall we're probably talking about 4 guys that I would say more than half the games in year one. I mean, I think it's going to be a pretty high volume in comparison to what most years typically is.
Drake May was the one I was thinking if it's the Patriots, because we know what the offensive line situation is there. They can try to build that team. They're not going to win a bunch of games with Brissett, I know, but watching him play and some of the holes he has in his game, that's a guy I would sit. I think if he set a year, I think his sophomore year could be great once they've set some spaces in for wide receiver and then also offensive line.
Well, I mean, that's the New England Patriots are the fascinating one because that's the one that I keep talking about. I know Diana Rossini just came out with a report this morning, but we've kind of been talking about it for a few weeks now where I'm not certain the New England Patriots even stick at 3 to take a quarterback, to be honest, right? I think that they are a definite trade back candidate, but if they do stick at 3 and take a quarterback, I think you're spot on because I was at the Combine this year and had the opportunity to speak to someone who is very good covering the New England Patriots and has some deep ties, and I really trust the insight that he brings. And they were basically telling me that right now how Jared Mayo and that staff kind of views this team defensively, they have a good roster and they feel like they can compete in 2024 with the defensive roster they have, but the offensive side, much different story. Like they locked up Michael Onwenu this offseason. I know they like Ramondre Stevenson as the running back, but aside from those two, they don't really have a lot of answers on the offensive side of the football, man. Like they need to completely overhaul that roster on that side of the ball. So I think if they do end up taking a quarterback, whether it is Drake May, whether it is even Jane Daniels, who's a little bit older, or a J.J. McCarthy, I think it might be best served to ease them along a little bit slowly because they need to upgrade the offensive line. They need to upgrade pass catchers. Like they have a massive need on the offensive side of the football, speaking about New England.
Ryan, so let me ask you this. If New England does trade back, do you think they still try and get into that range where they would be able to get like a Michael Penix as still a first-round quarterback? Or do you think they punt the quarterback conversation to another time when they've rebuilt more of the team and understand maybe more what a fit would be?
I mean, I think they would be open to if they trade back, I think they would be open to a quarterback depending on how far they drop if the right guy was there. But I don't think they would force it. I don't think that they would draft a guy just to draft a guy. Let's say they trade back with Minnesota, who's at 11, right? Like if they go to 11 and let's say a Bo Nix or Michael Penix is there and maybe they like him a little bit, but they don't love him. Like, I don't think they'll force it. Like, I think that the more likely scenario would be strengthen the trenches, get some pass catches throughout the process, and then maybe you take a swing on day 2 of a developmental guy. Like maybe you like a Spencer Rattler in round 3, let's say, just kind of for argument's sake, right? Like I think that they would punt on it a little bit. I think they would always be willing to try to upgrade the talent level in that room because, like you said, I mean, Jacoby Brissett is a fine stopgap quarterback, but getting talent in that room just for the long term is obviously essential for success in the NFL. But I don't think that they'll necessarily force a quarterback early on in this draft. I think that they view this more as a 3-year rebuild than a roster that can turn over in just 1 year. I think they'll be patient at quarterback to make sure that the window of maximizing the quarterback contract and the offensive surrounding pieces, I think that you want to try to match those windows.
Right. I grew up a Penn State fan, and it used to be that they'd have great college careers and horrible NFL careers. Now they have average college careers, and they're much better in the NFL. And there's a couple candidates, of course, this year for that. But the one I think is kind of sneaky is Theo Johnson, the tight end, who didn't get a lot of targets, a lot of catches, but I think he could really blow up with the way they do tight ends now in the league. What do you think about Theo Johnson, like as a 3rd or 4th round guy?
I mean, he's we've had like this constant debate on the podcast about, who is tight end 3, in this conversation. Who is a guy that you think could be the player that, because it doesn't typically happen, to your point, it's not usually guys are better NFL players than they were in college. Like, it doesn't usually happen, but there are always those cases of it does kind of boom later in their career. And Theo is certainly one of those guys that has the talent to do that, man. I mean, he has a 6'6" plus frame. He's got 250 plus pounds. He's got long arms. He's got a huge catch radius. He's certainly athletic. I mean, just go look at his combine testing, and he even ran slower to combine than he thought he was going to run, because he was actually a kid that I think prior to this past off season, prior to his final year, he actually broke Mike Gesicki's 40-yard dash record at Penn State. And Mike Gesicki was a freak in his own right coming out, a few years ago for Penn State. So Theo has all the tools, and he did have his best season in 2023. I think he had over 300 yards, 7 touchdowns. So he was more productive than he had been. The thing about Theo is that he kind of dealt with some nagging injuries over the last couple of years. So I don't think he ever really unlocked his full potential. But if he's able to tap into it and he goes to a good situation, he continues to develop, and he, remains healthy, I think he has about as much upside as anybody in this class outside of Brock Bowers. I think that he really has a massive upside athletically.
Ryan, I'm curious, because a lot of teams tend to look at things like they're a quarterback away, and usually that's not the case, right? We were just talking about that with New England in particular. But could you make the argument with the way Chicago has put together their roster recently that if Caleb Williams is who they think he is, that they really might be a quarterback away?
Yeah, I mean, they've been building it. I mean, I know that there's a lot of, and I know a lot of Chicago fans that are kind of frustrated with just the last few years from an ownership perspective. But I do think when you look at the roster, there is a lot to like. I mean, it really is. I mean, when you're talking about a good quarterback coming in, you want good pass catchers around him. Obviously, getting Keenan Allen this offseason, having DJ Moore on that roster already, having Cole Kmet on the roster, getting DeAndre Swift at running back. It's a pretty good baseline, of skill position talent. And then defensively, it seems like the Montez Sweat trade was a very justified one. I mean, he played very well for the Bears down the stretch. They got Jalen Johnson back on a contract. So there are some foundational pieces with Chicago, right? Like, I think that the major question is still, do they have the right head coach in place? I know they got the offensive coordinator from the Seattle Seahawks. Is he going to be a guy that can, take the offense to higher heights? But I think when you're talking about Caleb Williams potentially as the first, well, not potentially, Caleb Williams as the first overall pick, and then whoever they decide to go at 9. I mean, 9 is going to be fascinating because it could be best pass catcher available. Could be offensive tackle. I think you're going to continue to build around a Caleb Williams, and it is not a bad situation to be in. And if the coaching is up to par, I do think that they could contend for a wild card spot in 2024. Like, I think they certainly have enough foundational pieces to do that.
Ryan, if let's say best case scenario for the Bears at 9, let's say you've got both or all 3 of Rome Odunze, Joe Alt, and Brock Bowers on the board. Which direction do you go?
I mean, I would always lean towards Joe Alt just because I think Joe Alt is the best player available in that spot out of those 3. I think that he is one of the top 3 overall players in this class. It's just we're a quarterback needy team at the top, a lot of quarterback needy teams at the top, and there's a really good wide receiver class as well. But I would always defer to the trenches, man, because I know that today's the space game and everybody wants the really exciting pass catches, but the game really is still built from the inside out. I mean, if you look just consistently from the good teams, throughout the last few years, I mean, offensive line is usually a pretty consistent thing, like great quarterback play, good offensive line. That's usually how teams are built. But I mean, overall, I don't necessarily think there's a wrong answer there because, I mean, getting a Rome Odunze to go along with a Keenan Allen and a DJ Moore is still a really good pick in my opinion. I would go Joe Alt though, just because I think Braxton Jones has done some good stuff at left tackle the last 2 years, but I don't think it's the level where you're just like, I'm going to pass up an elite talent to continue to develop them, right? Like, I think bolstering the offensive line would be a very good asset. And I love Brock Bowers. I also think he's one of the best players in the draft. But at that spot, it's the positional value thing, right? Like, you already have a good tight end. I think Brock Bowers is arguably a generational one in his own right, but I just think that offensive tackle or wide receiver would be more my strategy at number 9 if those 3 were on the board.
I love the extremes when you have draft analysts, and it seems like for me, Latu out of UCLA either going to be the next Von Miller or he'll be out of the league in a couple of years because he's too injured. Where does he fall in that spectrum for you in terms of as a pass rusher?
He might be the most fascinating player in this class as far as like variance of projection, because I don't think anybody disagrees that he's a really high floor pass rusher, man. Like if there's someone asked me this the other day, and it's a very fascinating question, is if you had to bet on one pass rusher giving you 10 sacks in 2024, which one would it be? And it would probably be Latu. Like it probably would be. I mean, he has the best hand technique, best hand refinement, best pass rush plan of any rusher in the class. I mean, he is a NFL-ready rusher in 2024.
Yep.
The problem is, like, I'm not a doctor, right? Like, I haven't seen the medicals. I don't 100% know what those look like. I know that, he had to medically retire for a little bit after his early years at Washington. So, I mean, that's scary, right? Like, I mean, it is. But we've also seen some guys, like DK Metcalf had a neck injury. Jalen Phillips, he had more. His was the head injuries, but, I mean, he had concussion issues, but he had to medically retire as well early on in his UCLA career, and he came back. So we've seen players, get past that in those early trials and tribulations. But anytime we're talking about a neck, it's obviously scary, right? So depending on the neck, though, if he's good to go, I think that he is going to be one of the high impact rushers in this class. It is just going to come down to how long a medical staff can project that guy's going to be able to stay healthy in the NFL and is going to be able to last.
We're talking with Ryan Roberts of RiseNDraft.com. Ryan, I'm curious I'm curious about guys that you like outside of the first round, right? We get a ton of focus on, the early picks and especially the quarterbacks, but who's maybe let's say like between rounds 2 and 4, kind of those rounds where you can still find some starters on a pretty regular basis. Who are some guys that you look at there and think are either maybe undervalued or you think are just going to end up being really good pros?
Yeah, I mean, it's the greatest part of this process is I think we come to this conversation of who are the biggest sleepers or who are your guys in the class. And I mean, I have a guy almost at every position. I mean, a couple of my favorites, who I would say is Tyrese Knight out of UTEP, a linebacker. He reminds me so much of Dre Greenlaw that plays with the San Francisco 49ers, who he kind of fits that modern mold as far as a body type. But then you watch him and you're like, he has kind of a little bit of a throwback game. Like he's physical. Yes, he's explosive. Yes, he can work to the perimeter, but he is a really just physical downhill type of presence. And a guy that not many people have talked about. I mean, he got a Senior Bowl invite. He tested really well at the combine. I'm told that he's going to go between round 3 to 5, somewhere in that ballpark, right? So I think he's a starting will linebacker early on in his career, though. So Tyrese Knight is a guy that I value very heavily. I have a little bit of an allegiance to Notre Dame football, but I think that one guy that I just keep talking about constantly is Cam Hart, the cornerback out of Notre Dame. He is verified at the combine, 6'3", 33-inch arms, ran 4.5 flat, 39.5-inch vert, 10.10 broad, a really long, explosive athlete on the outside, and a player that has gotten better every single year. And in 2023, he was quietly one of the better corners in all college football. The biggest question about Cam is, and it's a little bit of a scary one, is that his biggest question is that he's had a couple shoulder injuries in the past. And anytime you're talking about a defensive player with shoulder injuries, it's kind of unsettling a little bit, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but, tackling is kind of a part of playing defensive football, right? So bad shoulders isn't the greatest situation to have, but I'm told scouts like him a lot, and I don't think he gets out of the top 100 picks, rounds 2 to 3, somewhere in that ballpark, because I just think that 6'3", 33-inch arms, athleticism that he has, playing high level and a lot of football at Notre Dame, I think that he's going to go a lot earlier than people anticipate, and if he's able to stay healthy, I think you have a starting corner on your hands very early on in his career.
Ryan, there's going to be a run on offensive linemen, and you mentioned all top 10, maybe even a Tennessee at 7, but when do you think that run starts, where the Vishanos and all the guys whose names are hard to pronounce start going? Is it right at 12? Is it at 13? I know the Saints need offensive tackle more than they need life itself, but where does that run happen where those 5 guys or so start going?
It's a great question. I really think it depends on where Joe Alt, who's most likely the first guy off the board out of Notre Dame. It depends where he goes. Where he pencil him into Tennessee, and it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, the Tennessee Titans need both offensive tackles. Like, they don't just need a left tackle. They could use a right tackle as well. So they're the easiest team, but I mean, does the Los Angeles Chargers at number 5 pull the trigger on someone early? Because then I will tell you that the run starts there because Tennessee needs to take an offensive tackle, like they have to, right? So that's where you might see an Olu Fashanu or Talisa Fulaga or somebody like that to number 7, and then the run really starts early there. But I think that when you nestle into like that early teens, I think that's when the run really starts because I look like the New Orleans Saints at number 14 and I mean, another team that is desperate for offensive tackle play. So I think it really depends on when Alt goes off the board in the top 7 picks. After that, though, I think the early teens is when we really start seeing that run start.
And Mims is going to be the best out of all of them, right? In terms of athleticism.
He could be, man. He's I talked about Latu, but like Mims is one of the more volatile draft prospects because when you're talking about just the physical profile, there's nothing he's missing. There's really not. I mean, he is tall, long, athletic. His film is really good. It really is. But the problem is he's only started 8 football games in his career. And everybody knows, but like offensive line is a position that experience matters. Like it really does, man. Like there's rarely ever guys that go into the NFL that just were barely starters in the NFL, in college or started very minimal games and then became studs. Like that just doesn't happen usually, right? So it's a little bit of a wild card, but and I think Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who I think is the best in the business, like I think he said on a podcast the other day that 5 years from now, if you told him Amarius Mims was the best offensive tackle in the class, he wouldn't be shocked. And it's true. Like I wouldn't be shocked at all. He has as much upside as anybody in this class.
I'm curious, we've talked about a couple different position groups that we think there's some depth at. Obviously, quarterback is one. You mentioned wide receivers earlier. I know some people think it's a pretty nice cornerback draft with several guys likely going in the first round as well. What position group do you like the most out of this draft?
You just mentioned one that I think is sneaky good. Like, because wide receiver, offensive tackle have kind of gotten the biggest conversation points, and for great reason. I mean, it's another historical wide receiver class. Offensive tackle, it's probably the deepest I've seen in the last, 4 to 5 years. Like, it's a really good class. But I think corner is really deep, and no one talks about that much, because we kind of focus on Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, who's fantastic, and Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, and Tyrion Arnold, and Kool-Aid McKinstry. And, I mean, there's a lot of really good ones up top. But, I mean, we're going to go into day 2, day 3, and you're going to find value, man. Like guys like Max Melton from Rutgers on day 2. I mentioned Cam Hart earlier. I mean, there's guys littered throughout this draft that I look at and say, like, that guy can play on the NFL level. Could be a good player. Like DJ James out of Auburn's another one where he might not go until the 3rd round because of just the volume of the cornerback class, but that kid's a starting corner in the NFL, in my opinion, right? So I think that the cornerback class is probably the most underrated and probably been my favorite to evaluate because, one, I historically do really well at corner, but I'm telling you, like, this year's class, I think that you can get a starter pretty much from round 1 to round 5 to 6. Like, there's legitimate upside in this draft.
I know you mentioned Quinyon Mitchell. The odds of him being the first defensive player picked currently is plus 1,800. That's a possibility, right? Because, I mean, technically he's the best one. It's just from a smaller school, right?
So funny enough, I actually have a bet in on him being the first defensive player off the board. So
nice.
I think it's very possible because, one, corner is a very heavily valued position in the NFL, right? We've talked about that, the last few years. It is increasing in value. Number 2 is you got to kind of read tea leaves a little bit, and when you're kind of like just keep hearing all these insiders and these mainstream analysts and all these leaked reports, nobody dislikes Quinyon Mitchell, man. Like nobody dislikes him. It is fascinating. And then the draft process matters, right? So he had 2 really good years at Toledo to end his career. He was the best player, in my opinion, at the recent Senior Bowl. Then he went to the combine and he was stellar, like tested like an elite athlete. I think all those things together, I would not be shocked at all if he's the top guy. I think if I remember correctly, Dallas Turner, I believe from Alabama, is the betting favorite.
Yeah, he's plus money. Yeah, he's minus money. Yep.
Yeah. So, but if Quinyon ended up being the first corner off the board, if Atlanta Falcons at 8 decided to go Quinyon Mitchell instead of a pass rusher, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think he has that type of upside, and his draft process is certainly trending that way.
Let's talk about pass rushers for a second here. You mentioned Dallas Turner. Is there a reason in your mind that Jared Verse doesn't get talked about a little higher? I mean, I've seen him as low as like in the mid-20s in some of these mock drafts. And I mean, he's got the measurables and the production, doesn't he? I guess, is there something I'm missing on him that people don't love?
I mean, he doesn't have his. I mean, he's my top edge on the board. Like I love Jared Verse in this draft. I think it's the style of game that he plays isn't as sexy as a couple of other guys.
He's powerful, right?
He is a speed to power converter. Like, he's got a great first step and he can threaten the outside track with that first step. But he's not a guy that's just going to bend and turn the corner consistently. Like, he's not a Dallas Turner, right? But also, Dallas Turner, I feel like we're really ignoring some warts, man. Like, his hands are just not good right now, and his pass rush plan is very simplistic. Like, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, I think, early on in his career. Now, if he hits, he's got star talent, like absolutely superstar level talent. But I think that we're really ignoring the fact that, like, Jared Verse, in the best games he played the last 2 years at Florida State after transfer from Albany, he was the best player on the field. And he is a 4.5 something athlete at 260 pounds, really explosive, really fast, and the power is outrageous. So I think that he's going to go a little earlier than some mocks are predicting. I still think number 14 to New Orleans is a possibility. I think Atlanta at 8 at least thinks about it. I don't necessarily think they go there, but I think they think about it. Number 14, New Orleans. Number 15, I think the Indianapolis Colts have that pick. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes off there. I think he could still be a top 15 pick, but I think it's the style of play that some people don't fall in love with as much.
Yeah, if you don't want him to succeed, make him a first-round pick for the Saints, because that's not where they succeed with defensive ends or pass rushers. It's when they get the guy late, like Granderson. If they take him early, he's going to be a flop. Let me ask you quick about who's gonna reach for Xavier Worthy. I mean, Al Davis has been gone for a long time now, but who's the person that says, man, I gotta have that speed?
Jacksonville maybe at 17. Like,
whoa, that early?
That I think is
wow.
Yeah,
wow.
It's possible, man. I mean, you mentioned. Wow. I mean, you can go back to Al Davis with, like, Darius Hayward-Bay. I mean, I can go back more recently with Henry Ruggs. I mean, like, I know it's kind of been the running joke for the Raiders, but teams tend to value the speed at wide receiver early
John
in the
Ross.
draft. I mean, it's John Ross. Yeah, I mean, those guys tend to move up the board a little bit. So, I mean, Jacksonville is the name that popped in my head just because I know they need outside speed. Like, they need that variable in their offense. And if let's say a Brian Thomas Jr. comes off the board before 17, like, they might be picking at 17 and being like, hey, man, we still need speed, right? Like, we still need it. So Xavier Worthy at 17, I think in the 20s, there's a ton of teams. Like, the Buffalo Bills make a lot of sense. I mean, if we get into the 30s and then the Kansas City Chiefs make sense, what I mean? Obviously at 32, but I think that he is going to go in the first round. There's a little bit of variance though on him just because he's not a great player right now. He's really, really fast.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That's Ryan Roberts from RiseNDraft.com. Ryan, really great stuff. We appreciate your time and enjoy the draft this week.
I appreciate it, fellas. Thank you guys for having me.
That's Ryan Roberts from RiseNDraft.com.
If he goes before 80, Mitchell, it'd be a travesty. One guy is a really good wide receiver. The other guy is really fast.
Yeah, but you famously don't get points for 40 speeds in
John
the
Ross
NFL.
is the best example. Never should have been a first rounder.
A lot of guys in that category. Coming up next, we'll have more on Hurrdat Sports Radio here, AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage.
Let me tell you something real quick.
What's up?
I'll never forget.
Kills.
Speed will kill you. Yeah. So your little legs. Anyway, so 1996, that draft. I will never forget thinking to myself, there'll never be another wide receiver draft like this.
1996?
96. Okay.
Hold on. I got Keyshawn.
Yep.
At number 1.
Yep.
96. Who else are we doing in 96? This is a weird one. Is JJ Stokes in that draft?
No. Well, unless he
might be
later.
lower.
So your first rounders are
Well,
Keyshawn, Terry Glenn.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the guy who was
Patriots,
right? So then you had Eddie Kinnison, who I loved coming out of LSU and only had a short career with the Saints and stuff, but Marvin Harrison went 19.
Yep.
Then you had Eric Moles, who coming out was a beast.
Really good for Buffalo for a while.
Coming out was a beast. Then you had Amani Toomer.
Yeah, he was really good for the
Giants.
Giants.
Very
for a long
good player
time.
for the Giants for a long time. Mushin Muhammad was in that
Panthers,
draft.
had a nice career with the
Nice run. Bobby Ingram out of Penn State.
Yeah.
Obviously didn't have the great pro career, but played in the Bears and stuff like that, and actually was pretty good. But I remember when I was scouting that draft, I was like, man, if you got 6 top wide receivers, you can't beat that. The last decade.
Oh, it's been crazy.
It's ridiculous. So
Insane.
look at this just this year and what you have in terms of possible talent. So we know how good Marvin Harris is probably going to be. Got some limitations on overall top speed, but come on, he's going to be great.
Yeah.
Malik Neighbors is the complete package. We're talking size, speed, contact, catching, all that stuff.
JJ Stokes was 95. Just that's
okay. Yeah. So he spit on a guy too. Or got spit on. Take it back. Roma Dunze, who is going to probably, like you said, be the third guy.
I love.
But
Roma
I'm telling
Dunze.
you,
he's got the best ball skills, I think. In the draft.
My number one thing with wide receivers, I want to see from you. I want to see you return punts and kicks and see how you look. That kid is a great return guy too. He was on my preseason watch list for the Jet Award. Brian Thomas, who is the second guy at LSU, might be down the road in terms of his height, size, speed, all that stuff.
Higher upside.
He might be. Yeah. His upside. Ladd McConkey, what a route runner.
From Georgia.
What a route runner. And can take contact if he's healthy. He's got to stay healthy because he got banged up a lot in college. A.D. Mitchell, who I mentioned to you earlier.
The Texas receiver that's actually good.
Dude's loaded. He can do everything. And then you're all the way down now at Troy Franklin, who's way undersized, I know, and it's scary for any guy on 175 pounds. Really small guy, but does a lot of good things, and we saw him in Oregon put up. Roman Wilson from Michigan. You see that guy run short area routes? What are you going to do?
Nothing.
He's a triple move kind of guy.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about a guy like that.
Yeah, you put that guy in short yardage situation, like you're not covering him.
Put him in the old Saints offense.
Yeah.
Where Peyton Manning, where Sean Payton was putting people in tough situations in the field, he'd be great there. So now I'm at 8. Kenyon Coleman, who I don't know. He's the biggest question mark at wide receiver for me. But he is 6'3", 213. Can high point the ball. Now, can he get separation? I don't know. I know he lit up LSU in that first game of the season and did everything he possibly wanted to do. That's at 10.
Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman. Sorry. Yeah. That's at 10, right?
So that's a dude I can tell you about Keon Coleman because I watched a lot of Florida State.
Yeah.
That is a dude that if he ran a 4.4 instead of a 4.6, he's in the top 20 picks.
Yep.
Like as a wide receiver,
his separation is not very good.
It's not, but he still finds a way to get open and he finds a way to get the ball. What have we seen? We just talked about this on the other side of it, right? Yeah. But what have we seen more often than not? Guys that are good wide receivers, their 40 times almost don't matter.
Not to the point where they'd be in a 4.3s for sure.
Yes.
You don't have to be there.
But there's a ton of guys that have been
Marvin Harrison, one of the greatest of all time, is a 4.5 guy.
There's a ton of guys in that high 4.5, low 4.6s, which is where Keon Coleman is.
Yep. He's a 4.61 at best.
Yes.
There was debating at the pro day that he ran like a 4.65.
So he might be a little of an outlier there.
Yeah.
But we've seen how many times where a guy's like, he's not quite as fast as we want him to be. Guess what? He's really good at football.
Sure.
His ball skills are incredible.
Yep.
And he does a really good job because he's big. He does a really good job of using his body to allow himself to be open.
No, I get it.
And so that's a guy where, okay, maybe you're not taking him in the first round, but if you're mid-second round, I think I saw him at 51 on one of these mocks. If you're mid to late second round and Keon Coleman's sitting there and you're like, I'm going to take a chance on a guy that was hyper productive
there was arguments before last season that he could be the second or third best wide receiver in this draft.
Keon Coleman?
Arguments.
Yes.
They didn't know what he ran, obviously,
right.
But that's what they were arguments.
But that's kind of my point, right? Yeah. If you watch the film and you can't tell that he's slow.
Yeah. Well, you can tell by his separation. Like, is he always got a guy right next to him?
Sure.
You remember, reminds me of is the guy who played for the Bears, played for South Carolina. Like that. Yes, he can get into contact and make catches, but he's never separated from anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to, as a quarterback, you got to make the decision. Do I actually throw into that coverage,
right,
or do I throw the guy who's got the 1 yard advantage or the 2 yard advantage? You got to make that decision. And that's tough on a quarterback sometimes.
For sure. You got to have him in the right position.
Got to have confidence that he's going to do
the right
it.
quarterback, which probably serves him better to have fallen down in these draft boards a little bit. So he ends up in a situation with better quarterback
play. He could be Marquise Colston.
Oh, yeah.
Never really had any separation, but never dropped the ball.
And was
incredibly productive for 6 or 7 years.
Like, there is a pretty long list of guys that are fairly big-bodied receivers that just don't run that well and are hugely productive in the NFL.
Can be productive, yes.
Like, that's if he was 6 foot and was running a 4.65, maybe we got some issues.
Right.
But because he's so big and so good and has such good ball skills, I think he's going to be a guy that ends up being productive in the NFL. I'm not saying he's going to be, Marvin Harrison or whatever, or Roma Dunze. Like, Roma Dunze is, to me, Keon Coleman if he runs a 4.4. Yeah. Like, that's the difference between those guys.
Right.
It's Keon Coleman with separation.
I've never seen a guy, and you shouldn't say never. I've never seen a guy with as late a hands as him. Never. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of guys with great late hands. Mm-hmm. Hell, Jerry Rice has great late hands. His hands are so late that sometimes I'm thinking there's no way on replay in slow motion is he going to get his hands up in time to catch this ball.
Right. And the advantage
It's
of
incredible.
that
The defensive back doesn't
is
know.
the defensive back has no idea the
Does
ball's
not
coming.
know. Does not know it's coming.
Which means the ball doesn't have to be perfect, because if the defensive back isn't turning to make a play on
and most times it was, because Penix throws the best deep ball of anybody in the
Penix throws an incredible ball.
Deep ball, yeah.
So, but if you're not giving the defensive back an opportunity to make a play on it, then all of a sudden, boom, doesn't matter as much. The ball doesn't have to be perfect.
And when both hands are on the ball for him, he's got such strong hands.
He's not missing.
Late and strong. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah, and Roma Dunze, I'm a big Penix guy. I liked that Washington team a lot in general, but mostly Penix and Dunze, where I'm watching those guys like, listen, I know some other guys at their position are going to get drafted ahead of him, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I understand the Caleb Williams with Michael Penix or whatever.
Yeah.
I like Michael Penix as much as any other quarterback in this draft outside of Caleb Williams.
There's issue. I mean, like I said, there's certain issues with what he can do and what he can't do, and I worry about the speed of the game overall, the rushing that he's going to deal with, the pressure he's going to deal with, and being able to compensate. Athletically, I think he's fine. The whole debate about his athleticism and the surgeries, he's fine athletically.
Well, he went and ran a 4.4 at his
Yeah, he's fine at straight line speed. Is athletically, he's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know what his lateral quickness is in terms of how quickly he is, and it's in the pocket, but I just worry about him at times. The Michigan tape is it's like this for everything. So if you love if you love a player, go find the worst game they played, right?
Let's see how you feel about him then.
And then think, probably the worst game he played was against Michigan.
Yeah.
And when Michigan started lighting him up and doing certain things and falling into zones while being able to get pressure with 4, he was shook. He missed throws that I didn't see him miss the whole year.
Yeah. I haven't seen him miss
Jalen Polk throw. That's it. That's him walking out there most years and just handing it the ball.
Yeah, that's a touchdown in 99% of the other games he's ever played.
So you worry about that. But everybody's got those games.
Yeah.
Everybody's got those games. The number 1 overall pick played a game against Notre Dame that the tape should be found and burned by him.
Yeah.
He should run down everybody who has the tape from the Notre Dame game and burn it.
Yeah.
He's the number 1 player in the draft.
It sounds like you're talking about Penix, right? Sounds like he would be great for the Raiders then. So, since he can't carry a team like that. I mean, you're back to that. You're back to the Raiders having a quarterback like that. The
Raiders' offensive line.
They always have a quarterback like that.
Raiders' offensive line.
They haven't had a good quarterback since Gannon.
Think about that. Gannon out of Delaware who bounced around and then ended up in the right situation.
I know. He was with the Vikings.
That's one of those situationally dependent quarterbacks right there.
He got lucky. He ran the right situation. Yeah, right time.
Good old Billy C.
That's right. Billy, man, can coach. He's still coaching offensive line. Where is he now? He just went someplace else.
Yeah, he's been coaching offensive line.
It's not Seattle, is it? Where'd he go?
Bill Callahan. We're going to look it up real quick.
He went some new place this year.
No,
he left the Browns.
Was with the Browns.
Left the Browns.
Tennessee.
Okay. Yeah. They will have a good offense. They will have a good offensive line.
He's one of the best offensive line coaches that's ever done it. I think he's genuinely an offensive genius. I think he maybe struggles as a head coach, which is a lot of guys.
I know these guys are getting ready to do this podcast, and it's all about looking back at the different coaches and what could have happened and what didn't happen and all kind of stuff. And I told him, I said, if you give me one, I want Bill Callahan, because I can argue that Bill Callahan could have made it work here.
I agree.
And it's so close that it came down to, in my opinion, still a purified fumble at the beginning of that Oklahoma game. I think that turns the whole game. I think Nebraska wins that Big 12 championship game. I think they have an incredible 06, 07 recruiting class.
They were about to, yeah.
They were about to.
Bill
had a moment. It's just outside of his first 15 plays with college kids, he struggled.
Bill Callahan was best when he was with the Jets because he was in New York and he was farthest away from here that he could possibly be.
Shut up.
Coming up next, we're going to talk a little Colorado football. Deion keeps losing his luggage. We'll get into that next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. Appreciate Michael Severe joining us today. He had to take off to get to his real job, but we appreciate him filling in. And want to remind you that we're brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. Make sure you get to the casino in Lincoln or Horseman's Park in Omaha to the best place to place your sports bets in the state of Nebraska. Straight bets, parlays, props, live in-game bets, whatever you can think of. You can place bets on nearly every major sporting event at Warhorse Sportsbook. Got NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs going on right now. Go see if you can be a winner at Warhorse Sportsbook. Go to warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook to get a full list of details and house rules. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Joining us now on the Hurrdat hotline, talk a little bit about Colorado football. Not that it's been a busy week around there or anything. We've got Brian Howell joining us. Brian, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Brian's a beat writer for Buff Zone, and I guess kind of go through the last week here as a writer following Colorado football, where the transfer portal has kind of started taking away, it seems like, more than it's giving for Colorado football. Does it feel different this time around when these guys are, I think, almost entirely, if not largely, all guys that
Jordan Seaton, who was the number one, prep offensive line recruit in the country in this class, and they brought in 5 transfer offensive linemen. They added a 6th one this last weekend. They got a guy from Texas, and so the previous 5 linemen they've got were all FBS starters last year, and so they've totally revamped this offensive line. And by all accounts, it looks different, and they are playing much better than they did last year.
Yeah, you mentioned by all accounts because he doesn't really let you see much, right, in terms of what's actually going on there. I guess, is this one of those situations, and I know it is to a certain extent everywhere, but is this one of those situations where you're really not going to have a good idea of what this team looks like until, late August, early September?
Yeah, exactly, because, the only thing we get to see from practice is what everybody else sees on the videos put out by Deion Jr., and they're going to obviously weed out things that look bad, but you have to kind of read between the lines. And I wrote this the other day that when Deion was asked about the offensive line almost exactly a year ago, his response was, "This is not the team we're going to be playing with in Texas." And so he basically was saying the offensive line is not very good. And he expressed concerns about the line even during the offseason last year, even in fall camp. When he was asked about the line on Thursday, he said, "This group is different. These are some dogs." He spoke highly of the offensive line. So if you want to read into how they talk about these groups, then you can summarize that it's probably a better group right now. But we won't know until they start playing games in August.
We're talking with Brian Howell of Buff Zone. So looking back at last year, you obviously they get off to the good start, go 3-0, and then it goes off the rails a little bit, and 1-8 the rest of the way down the stretch. And maybe you saw some cracks in the foundation against Colorado State. Obviously, have the Travis Hunter injury, so there's a lot going on there. But as you look at the team last year, and obviously there's a lot of different pieces, which parts of the success do you think are replicable this year?
Well, I think obviously Shedeur, is back, and he looked really good last year, despite having really not a very good offensive line. And I think that you've got a great quarterback to start with. I think Travis Hunter, certainly, coming back is huge on both sides of the ball. I think that there were times last year on defense they played well. They were opportunistic. I think that is replicable. The receivers were really good, and I think they're just as good, if not better, this year, even though there's some changes. And so I think those things can be the same as last year. But, really the rest of it, I mean, the defense was not good overall. They didn't stop people. They struggled to run the football and struggled to block for Shedeur. So if those things are the same, it's going to be a long year.
Well, I'm glad you went there, because my next question was, if the wheels fall off or this thing doesn't work out or goes south for some reason, where are the areas you look at as potential places that it could go wrong?
Well, offensive lines for sure. I think
if it doesn't gel or whatever.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. If that line doesn't come together, then I think this could be a long year offensively. And they have to run the football. That was their thing, is they could not run the football last year, and they didn't commit to it. I think they could have actually been decent running the football if they committed to it. But if there's no run game, it's going to be hard offensively. And then defensively, they just got to tackle better. I mean, they gave up a lot of big gash plays up the middle. They struggle in that area, and they've really bolstered the defensive line. They actually added another couple of guys this last weekend. And so I think if that doesn't come together, then, Big 12. I mean, you guys watch Big 12 a little bit. I'm sure that, those offenses put up points. And so, if you're not able to stop the run in the Big 12, it's lights out.
Brian, as we kind of get into, it's hard to pick recruiting cycles with Deion, because every time the transfer portal opens, it feels like a new recruiting cycle. So it feels like we're 3 or 4 deep at this point. But as we get further into this thing, and we see guys that Deion brought in get sent back into the portal or encouraged to go back in the portal, however you want to put it, do you think it's going to be harder for him at any point when guys are like, okay, I might be his guy today, but looks like there's a good chance I'm not going to be his guy tomorrow? Do you think that becomes a challenge for him in recruiting out of the portal at some point? or is there just always going to be kids that want to play for Deion?
I think both. I think that there's a lot of kids that the fact is guys go into the portal a lot of times because to Deion's point, they were backups, right? They weren't playing a whole lot at their previous school, and they want to go to a spot where they think they can start. And so when you come to Colorado, you think you can start, and now all of a sudden, if you're not in that position, you can see guys jumping back into the portal. But there are always going to be those guys that want to play for them. I mean, every recruit I talk to, when they commit here, like, why would you not want to play for Deion Sanders? He's got a gold jacket, and they've got Warren Sapp now on as a GA, and defensive linemen will say, why would I not want to learn from Warren Sapp? And so there's always going to be that appeal. But I think that a lot of kids, I don't know if it's a lot, but we've seen some kids that come in and just get disenchanted with the whole thing when they're not playing.
That's Brian Howell of Buff Zone. We appreciate it, Brian, and I'm sure as the fall turns around, we'll be catching up with you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
That's Hurrdat Sports Radio. Me and DB will be back tomorrow on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln.
See you. Have a good day. Love you.